of Reddit who married divorcees, at what point did you realize there might be a reason the other person divorced them? Story 1. This is secondhand, but it's a good one. About a year after I signed the divorce papers divorced my ex-wife for cheating on me, I met the guy she'd cheated on me with. I actually didn't know him by sight, but apparently he'd seen a few pictures of me, like the ones in my bedroom. He walked up to me, introduced himself, and then started apologizing for being the one to break up my marriage. I was pretty much over it by then, but I was still pissed off enough to say something like, yeah, well, man, it wasn't like you were the only guy she was cheating on me with. I'm pretty sure she was with a dude named Brian the whole time she was with you. He got real quiet, apologized again, and then left. A few weeks later, someone told me that he had moved out and was in the process of divorcing her. I'll never know for sure if it was my telling him about the other man that was the tipping point for him, but I like to think it was. Edit. Yes, there was a Brian, not his real name, although it hardly matters. I knew about Brian from a friend, and plus she'd admitted that there had been others besides the guy I confronted her about. Why he felt the need to apologize, I have no idea. Seemed like a nice enough guy aside from the sleeping with another man's wife thing. Did I do it for revenge? Not really. It was just a spur-of-the-moment thing, mostly a knee response to an emotional situation. Sometimes you get to say the perfect cutting remark. Sometimes you think of it in the parking lot after the opportunity is lost. I got lucky and didn't say something like, that's okay, man, and regret it for the rest of my life. I used to feel sorry about it because it might have broken up a marriage, but if that marriage wasn't built on trust to begin with, then chances are the infidelity was going to happen anyway or again if you look at it that way. Story 2. I dated a divorcee for quite some time. She never told me she was divorced, which really wouldn't have bothered me. I ended up finding out about her past from one of the several people she was cheating on me with. Edit. My top comment is about the worst experience of my life. Woo! Story 3. When I woke up at 3 a.m. to pee and she was in the living room texting some dude, kinda went downhill from there. Edit. To answer questions. I asked her who she was texting. She said some guys she met while out with girlfriends. I then asked if something was going on. She swore that she was not cheating, but that she found him intriguing. Big flag there, because that's how she described me when we first met. So I snooped her internet history on her computer over the next couple days. She had been looking him up on Facebook, had directions to his house, and had done various searches on various "am I pregnant" terms. There's a lot more to it, but from there, it was lots of yelling, threatening, and ultimately lawyers and divorce. To this day, she swears she didn't cheat, but she's the type of person where everything bad that happens is not her fault. Story 4. A friend's parents got divorced when she was in high school. They'd been together nearly 20 years, but they argued constantly. After they got divorced, her dad bought the other half of the duplex they lived in and became best friends with her mom. They went out to dinner several nights a week, never fought over what to do with the kids, helped each other with bills. They just dated other people too. My friend said she wished they would have done that years ago. Story 5. My husband had an engagement that ended before we met, and the reasons always seemed weird to me. Something about her trying to get rid of their dog and getting into a huge fight with his mom when she made a snarky comment about the dog thing, and then getting her mom and sister to call and harass his mom about the fight. Big, ridiculous argument that ended with them deciding they weren't going to work out. They'd been together for like 4 years. Now I completely get it. Well, not the part with her mom and sister, but the rest of it. The dog was awful. Peed everywhere, was very dominant and aggressive, like biting, drawing blood aggressive at times, and old enough that he was very difficult to train since they hadn't done about it when he was a puppy. The dog now lives with my mother-in-law because it's not safe to have him in a home with babies. And my mother-in-law is a nightmare, but my husband and his ex saw her multiple times a week, whereas we see her once every couple of months. At one point, about a year in, we had a big argument where I told him we were heading down the same path as them if he didn't get his together, and that if you have the same problems with 2 long-term relationships in a row, you need to consider that you're part of the problem. And that I was out if he didn't set serious boundaries with his mom and get some training for the dog. Fortunately, it was apparently a wake-up call because that was 7 years ago, and neither is an issue. Story 6. I briefly dated a divorcee. Till a common friend told me he was still married and often used that as a sympathy card to get women. Edit. Since this has gotten some attention, I'll clarify. This guy is 26. He got married very young to a woman 7 years older than him and apparently instantly regretted it. He had been building up the marital troubles story for a while now and recently started telling everyone at work he got a divorce. I work with him and had no reason to doubt it. Unfortunately for him, I am good friends with someone in his university circle who knows his wife very well. When I found out, I confronted him, and he started claiming he was in love with me and hadn't had the courage to ask his wife for a divorce yet, but would do it soon. Pretty much the exact same line he had used on another girl a few weeks ago. Story 7. A divorcee who dated a divorcee. He got shit-faced drunk on his B-day and told me, "I see why your husband left you," right after I'd given him a 250 watch he'd been wanting. I eventually left because A, I realized he was a rebound that had lasted way too long, and B, he was going to eventually kill someone with his drinking and driving, and I really didn't want it to be me. Edit. Yes, I got the watch back and returned it. I understand that 250 might not be a lot for a watch, but at that time, 250 was a lot for me. I wasn't making that much and was living off student loans. I basically saved extra from my paychecks until I could afford it. Edit 2. I posted this when I was still groggy from sleep. I apologize for not including context. It was my ex-boyfriend's birthday. He was the guy I dated after divorcing husband. We had planned to go to a strip of bars. I figured we should get an Uber so we don't have to bum a ride. At that point, I was trying to keep him from drinking and driving as much as possible. Yes, I had reported him to the cops on 2 other occasions, but I didn't know his license plate number and, as far as I know, they never caught him. To be honest, I was still hurting from the divorce and was clinging to what I subconsciously knew was a bad situation. Either way, we Ubered to the bars and met up with friends. He got very drunk. I asked the bartenders to cut him off, but he just got other people to buy him drinks. So closing time comes around, and he tells me he wants to get food with his friend. His friend, who is driving, is only slight more sober than. I tell no way and try to get him to Uber. I tell him we can order food and just be comfy at home. He's not going for it. I finally tell him that I legitimately do not feel safe getting into a car with that guy. It's at this point that he starts yelling at me, telling me that I'm killing his buzz, ruining his birthday, and that he sees why my husband left me. It hurt. A lot. He wound up getting in the car with his friend and leaving me there. I was in a popular area, so it wasn't hard to find a friend to pick me up. The next morning, he claimed he didn't remember. I dumped his and asked for the watch back. Story 8. Little different, I guess. My widowed mom started dating a guy in her Sunday school class who was recently divorced. Very quiet, but nice. Her friends in the class told her that he was never home, always hunting or at work, but that he was a nice man. Warning her, but not scaring her off. He and mom got married. Still very quiet, but again nice. Turns out he was just depressed. His wife of 25 years had been cheating on him with the same guy for at least half that time. He worked all the time, or went on hunting trips with friends, as he just didn't want to be at home. Mom told him that it was too bad he couldn't retire so they could just enjoy their time together. He was 50, mom was 53. He said he could retire, and did so. They spent the next 20 years having a great time, traveled extensively, just enjoying each other's company. They had a great marriage before he passed away. Missed by all of us. Sometimes the divorce is 100% the fault of one party. Just because you divorced doesn't mean you were a failure. Story 9. My parents are divorced and both got remarried. My mom found it beneficial to attend a divorce care group at her church. She ended up going out with the guy who ran the group and seemed like a great dude. When I asked her about him, she told me he had been divorced himself 2 separate times himself already, which was a pretty huge red flag to me, but apparently not to her. Fast forward 12 years, and he's been unbelievably emotionally abusive to her. There was also a point when my brother and I were teenagers, where we literally weren't allowed to live with them anymore, because he felt threatened he wasn't the man of the house. She says she's happy still, which is truly all I want for her, but it's pretty frustrating when a 13-year-old can see the red flags my 40-year-old mother couldn't. Edit T. Story 10. I had my wife cheat on me. Ended up meeting someone who was perfect and just thought I had hit the karma jackpot. She liked literally all the same things as me. When I asked about her past, I'd hear stories of what sounded like abuse, but it was always implied, like I was so scared. I thought he was going to hit me. Then, one night she went mental on me. Started getting mad about me wanting to visit my daughter who was in the hospital. She wanted to go on a date instead. started throwing glass at me, and it was like rain. Went to get away, and she came after me and clawed the out of the back of my neck, then yanked me backwards by my collar where I ended up on top of her. I pushed her away and just got out. She called and started threatening me since I had hit her and falling on her. My options were come back to the house or she would call the cops and report me for abuse. I hung up on her and called the cops instead. By the time the cops showed up, she had bruises on her neck. She self-inflicted them to claim I had done it, just hadn't called the cops yet. My hands showed no signs of aggressive force, plus the back of my neck earned her a trip to prison. It was at that point I realized how duped I was. I knew she was the reason for her previous divorce. I think this question implies any divorced person is flawed. That isn't fair. If you ever dated and broke up with someone, you are in the same exact boat. Divorce just often gets messy because there is legal follow-up. Story 11. My ex of about 2-ish years was in the process of a divorce when we met. His wife was crazy, and the reason for everything wrong in his life. This should have been my first clue to GTFO. But I was young. You live and learn. He had kids, and I would go to sporting events for them, and his ex-wife would be there the vast majority of the time too. We started to get along, and he hated that. I didn't get that. Wouldn't it be easier for the kids if her and I had a good relationship? Oh no! We would compare notes on him, and it would ruin our relationship. We quite literally never talked about him. My eyes started to open here. I was using his computer once and his Google Calendar opened, and there was an event on Valentine's Day the next week, which he had told me we were not doing anything for due to money, which of course was his ex fault. So I opened it okay. Shouldn't have been snooping, and the event was day ex-girlfriend broke my heart. Now this ex of his was prior to his 20-year relationship with his now ex-wife. So I figured out that he never let anything go. Apparently ever. A couple months later, our relationship was staring to decline on its own. He went over to a friend's house without me, in the middle of a planned date night. And I didn't care that he left. I was mad he took the dog though. We got in a fight and he told me I was starting to sound like his ex-wife. To which I responded, if we are saying the same exact things and are such different people, don't you think the issue is you? I realized at that exact moment that he was a narcissistic who was never going to change or grow up. I moved out a week later. I still miss the dog. TLDR. A million little things finally connected in my mind, and I realized he was narcissistic and manipulative. 7 years later, and I would still love to sit down with his ex-wife and hear her side of the story. Edit. I just feel I need to clarify that I was not friends with his ex-wife. We were friendly and were cordial to each other. We only ever made small talk and conversed about the kids, and my ex-boyfriend was always present during our conversations. He was just stewing over the fact that we didn't hate each other. That said, I miss the kids too, but I admittedly miss the dog more. Story 12. When we had a kid. My husband has always been a workaholic. It didn't cause too many problems when it was just us, but was a lot harder to manage once we became parents. It's easy to feel like you are doing all of the work, and I started resenting my husband. My husband and his ex-wife had 2 kids close in age. She was essentially a single parent to them throughout the day. He did cut back his hours slightly when our relationship started to suffer, and even that was a lot. I understood why the divorce happened. I considered it at points during the relationship. Edit. What is with the ridiculous assumptions? I never said I was a stay-at-home mom. I was also working. We were very ready for our son. We were in our 40s when we adopted him. He was planned, wanted, and we could easily afford to have a child. Even with cutting his hours, we were still able to afford our high-rise in Manhattan. He didn't have to work as much as he did. He just didn't know any different. I wasn't taking my husband's pay hike, and we didn't have a child we couldn't afford. You make one comment on Reddit and everyone thinks they know your life. Ridiculous. I also feel the need to add that I never said I would have preferred my husband to be addicted to drugs or alcohol. All I said was that it was hard on our marriage, and I understood the reason behind the divorce. Before having a kid, I didn't understand what the big deal was. When I was coming home after a long day of work to take care of our son by myself, I understood. Story 13. Married to a divorcee. I realized with my very first interaction with his ex-wife. She is a controlling, delusionally self-important asshat who ended up cheating and then divorcing. I'm surprised he wasn't the one to file for divorce, but I had my share of bad relationships in the past too. My husband is lovely. Story 14. Didn't actually marry the divorcee I dated, but came close. Fortunately, I realized beforehand that she was completely selfish. Everything was always about what she wanted, and she found subtle ways to devalue anything I wanted or that was good for me. She also had been hiding a bad temper from me, which came out finally toward the end. After the breakup, she tried spreading lies about me to all our mutual friends to make herself look better. Fortunately, most of them were aware enough to realize what she was doing. Definitely dodged a bullet. Story 15. Woo, okay. Story time. So my mom just got divorced from my dad my senior year of high school. She has always been the kind of person to be in a relationship, so she started immediately dating around since my dad cheated on my mom multiple times. She met this guy on POF, who we're going to call Tom. Tom was a successful marketing guy with no kids, a steady income, and was divorced because his wife cheated on him. Early in the relationship, my mom gets a message from Tom's ex-girlfriend, current boyfriend. She says that she needs to tell her some things about Tom, but my mom ignores her. A year goes by and Tom seems normal. She moves in with him and so do we since he has 2 spare bedrooms. Has a cool guy who seems chill and really nice. He'll sometimes go through my mom's phone, she told me, but she thought that all the good things outweighed the bad. Cut to election day, where things aren't going so well for my mom and Tom since they're both liberal. They drink and Tom throws a remote at the window. He calls the police on himself. My mom forgives him. This is where things start to get weird. Tom starts acting crazier towards my mom, mostly via text message. On Christmas Day, she decides that we don't want to go to his sister's house because she's drunk. We open the trunk to his car to get the presents out, and he drives away with stuff flying out the back. He apologizes. My mom is super weary at this point. Cut to New Year's where Tom is out of town. She texts him that she wants to break up with him because he's saying that it's my autistic brother's fault that the carpet on the stairs is falling apart. He says, "Get your kids out of my house." So the next day, we have 8 people come over to move the furniture that's my mom's while he threatens us over the phone. That was in January. Over the next few months, and still to this day, he sends crazy threatening messages to my mom. He also found out where we live so he could take the shared BMW that they owned jointly and sell it, even though my mom has been begging him to take it. She finally gets in contact with the lady's boyfriend at the beginning of the story. They share stories and she apologizes for not listening sooner. TLDR, my mom dated a normal divorcee who turned out to be a complete psychopath. Story 16. Hoo boy. Where to start? When I initially asked him why they divorced, his response was that she turned into a bitter person, gained 120 pounds, and was taking money without talking about it first. They weren't very well off at first, and she ended up ghosting him after draining their joint account. We have both joint and separate accounts, 5 years into a relationship and 4 years after moving in together. We have a kid together. When I withdraw money from the joint account, he forgets about it, then has a sticker shock reaction upon checking the account balance. It's definitely draining, but keeping post-it notes on our closet mirror helps to remind him so he doesn't flip out about it. He had horrible eating habits before we met, and his mother said he was always that way. We both have high metabolisms, but when we're tired and it's dinner time, my idea of a quick meal is tuna salad and fruit, while his is a double quarter pounder. I can see how she got lazy about her eating habits. He gets very burnt out at his job and often gives up after work on cooking healthy. He's a lot better about it now, since we have kids, and that won't fly anymore. He's also pretty cynical, but so am I. She didn't know how to take a joke, was constantly overanalyzing everything he said and taking everything personally, even if it wasn't meant to be. I can understand that too, if you're not used to and like that type of personality. We all have our quirks, and I love him more every single day. Sometimes personalities just don't match, and that's okay. Stealing someone's life savings and indirectly forcing them to file bankruptcy after losing a house to foreclosure by lying about making house payments, though? Stacy, that hurt him. Everything else I can forgive you for. I can even thank you for leaving him, but you for making him start over. My ex had been married previously, and his wife commits suicide. When I met him, I assumed his late wife must have had a lot of problems with depression or something and didn't think he had any impact on her decision at all. It took me a year and 8 months to leave him. He was emotionally and verbally abusive. He became angry easily. He would make hurtful jokes and then say I was being too sensitive and that he's just a blunt person, so deal with it. Now, I know a person's suicide cannot be entirely due to someone else because it is ultimately that person's decision. But in that year and 8 months, I realized it's feasible she ended her life because of his emotional issues impacting their relationship. I realize now that I began dating him with the idea I could save him. Some introspection and reading has helped me get over my savior complex. Save yourself. Edit for those asking. The Art of Letting Go. The Path to Inner Freedom is a good book on overcoming codependent behaviors. Also, just looking for info on codependent behaviors brings up a wealth of resources on Google. Am still struggling with being codependent, but overcoming it is a daily practice, not necessarily a cure it and it's gone thing. Edit 2. Wow! I got gold! This is my first gilded comment. Thanks. My ex never acknowledged his behavior and always blamed me, so it means so much just to know that other people can relate and to know that I wasn't just overreacting. Also, I'm at work, so I can't respond as quickly to everyone as I'd like. Story 17. I dated a divorcee for a hot sec. She was actually a really wonderful lady, but she obviously had some lingering feelings about how things had gone with her ex. The first time this came up was one night we were at a bar and I ended up in a fairly intense, fun conversation about music with the male bartender. She got weirdly upset about this and started dropping lines like, "Well, maybe you just want to go home with him, and it's obvious you guys are into it." A bit later, when she found out my brother is gay, she got weirdly passive-aggressive and started saying enough offensive things that I eventually broke up with her. Turns out her ex-husband left her for a man. Story 18. My wife and I are both divorcees and we're pretty acutely aware of each other's flaws beforehand. She actually lived with me and my ex for a while when I was still with the ex. She hadn't been divorced that long at the time. We just rest safely in the knowledge that our flaws fit each other better than they did with our exes. Story 19. This isn't about me, but it's kind of funny. I used to work with this in-house mechanic, kind of a weird, quirky guy. He was married for 14 years, got divorced, met another divorced woman, and has been in love ever since. He said they were both treated like in their former marriages and are grateful to have one another. I remember him telling me when he was with his ex, he drank a lot. He'd leave work on his lunches and down a few bottles of Mickey's. One day, he was walking to the liquor store when he realized instead of buying alcohol he could be spending his money on a gun. He stopped drinking ever since. Story 20. Obligatory. Not me, but my divorced aunt and uncle. My mom's brother married my ex-aunt, despite everyone telling them it was a bad idea. They moved to the East Coast and had 2 kids. Both on the autistic spectrum, this is relevant. Their daughter is the oldest and higher functioning, but her little brother is nonverbal. My uncle was a stay-at-home dad while my ex-aunt worked. Eventually, she divorces him and kicks him out of the house. At this point, she had both kids. My uncle is convinced that he's the only one who can properly take care of his son and wants to fight for custody. Having been unemployed for so long, he can only find shitty retail work that doesn't pay a livable wage. He sleeps on a friend's couch for a long time, but they eventually give him a deadline to move out. So he's in a pretty pitiable situation. My mom is pretty worried about her brother and her nephew, so my dad suggests that we help out. My dad has a well-paying, stable job, and one of my sisters was at college, so we had an extra room. Plus, I could share with my other sister to make more room for his son. We could definitely afford to support him for a few months while he finds a better job and gets custody of his son. Holy, this guy. Literally every sound he makes is ear-splitting. Talking, whispering, sneezing, spitting out his toothpaste. Imagine being woken up by a cartoonish Pete Way from across the house. This guy has zero self-awareness. Actually, no, he was aware. He was just aware of all the wrong things. He could tell he was putting a strain on our lives, but instead of listening to how we needed him to help, he would help in his own ways. He would do our laundry despite us telling him not to. He destroyed several items of clothing that didn't belong in the dryer. My sister once asked him to carry over a bucket of water for our chickens. Should have taken him 1 minute. 10 minutes later, he comes back to her with no bucket, asking her to move her car so he could use our truck to drive the water over. This is a grown, able-bodied man. And then there's his parenting. He had his son for visitation while he negotiated custody. His ex-wife only wanted custody despite him. She didn't actually want to take care of him. I don't know how this kid doesn't have diabetes yet. We were the only ones enforcing a healthy diet and not just pizza and crescent rolls for this kid. And it was a hassle. This is a 2-year-old in a 10-year-old's body. He had frequent accidents, but my uncle wouldn't clean them up properly, leaving both of their rooms smelling like human. There's so much more, but the absolute worst thing was that those few months became 2 years. Instead of looking for a better job, he does have a degree and experience, so it wasn't impossible. He got another retail job and refused to leave because he was friends with the boss. Never mind that it would never pay enough to support him and his son. He couldn't burn such a valuable bridge. So even after getting custody of his son, he continued to leech off of us. It broke my heart to see my mother slowly lose respect for her brother. Eventually, my parents had enough and gave him a couple months to get out. He still doesn't have his own house. He moved into another family-owned property so he could keep his low-paying job. His ex-wife might have been crazy, but any sane person would have divorced him. Story 21. Absolutely never. I married a 3-time loser when she was 32 and I was 27. We dated for 6 months and the marriage was going strong when she died 38 years later. Problems? Sure, we had a lot, but we knew enough about each other before marriage make it work through those problems. Story 22. I just proposed to mine 2 days ago after 5 years together. I cannot find the reason why any sane man wouldn't have shot everyone else to stay with her. He'll report back after the next 5 years. She's crazy, but she's my kind of crazy. Note to you youngins, they are all crazy. Find the one that works for you. Story 23. Well, I didn't marry him, but my ex-boyfriend was divorced, and he made it seem like his ex-wife was a total. He said that he gave everything to her, even quit his job to move to Georgia with her. They both previously lived in Minnesota. He said he had paid for all of her bills and makeup and clothes, and even paid for couples trips, and she took a different guy with her on a lot of them, leaving her husband behind. The marriage ended when she went on a trip to New Orleans with her friends and didn't come back. About a couple weeks into our relationship, he began to get extremely possessive over me. I figured it was because he had been through so much with his last relationship, so I tried to overlook some of it, but it got so intense that he printed out a list of rules that I was to obey, which I obviously refused to accept. I wasn't allowed to go anywhere without telling him. He had to have visual evidence of my work schedule. It was ridiculous. So, logically, I broke up with him. But he was relentless. He kept showing up at my house and work, and it was just embarrassing. Finally, I threatened to get a restraining order, and he left me alone. A few months later, I get a Facebook message from this random woman who is asking me if I'm okay. I'm like, yeah, why? Like, who are you, you know? It turns out that she was the crazy ex-wife, except that they were never really married. They were dating for a bit, and when she refused to let him pay her rent, he bought the house from the owner and would not accept her rent money. He bought a lot of trip tickets and used his key to go into Hera's house to put them on her coffee table. She never went on any of the trips. She moved, but he found her apartment and would leave love letters in her mailbox. He threatened her friends on Facebook, forbidding them from stealing her from him. Finally, she got her own restraining order and moved far away. So yeah, this still creeps me out because sometimes I get a feeling that he's stalking me, but I know it's probably just paranoia. Story 24. Pretty soon. It was clear that his first wife was just a bad fit, and he wasn't really into her enough. She was his first real girlfriend, and she did all the relationship management. She was wild about him, and she was the one who said when they were boyfriend-girlfriend, when it was time to move in together, when it was time to get married, etc. I think he just thought this is how relationships worked. Women were always more into it than men. Women make the decisions and you go along with it. I think he also loved how crazy about him she was, even if it wasn't totally mutual. But she was also very demanding, which is not something that works well for him. He was not too different with me than with her, to be honest, and I did find it frustrating. Even as full-grown adults, it took him maybe a year before he would refer to me as his girlfriend, and we dated for 8 years before we decided to get married, which is a long time when you're in your 30s. Many times I had to think, can I just be patient and wait because he's worth it, or should I bail and find someone who is more focused on what he really wants and can go for it? The choice I made is obvious, but it wasn't easy, always waiting and doing things on his timeline. But I know that you can't rush people or make these kinds of decisions for them. We actually did break up after dating for about 9 months because he was so slow about these things. He always seemed ambivalent. This was pretty soon after his divorce, maybe too soon I now realize. He even said a number of times that he wanted to be able to make the type of committed promises I asked, but just felt unable, so I moved on. Or so I thought. We broke up for a year, and I dated other people, but my ardor for him only increased rather than reduced. Still, I am not sure if we would have gotten back together if our paths hadn't crossed twice by luck. The first time we had hooked up, but I thought of it as a for old time's sake sort of thing. But then we bumped into each other again and it was just fireworks. Still, I thought I would leave that as another lost weekend. But a few weeks later, I called him and asked him out deliberately. We spent every weekend together for months before we decided to talk about what was really happening. Over the year we had been apart, he had recovered a lot and was way more ready to be in a committed relationship, though it was still slow going. As for me, I had also sort of cooled my jets on that one. I missed him, and I realized I'd rather have him slowly than not at all. Story 25. Not married, but am dating a divorcee. Most of the time he's amazing, but the jealousy and clinging is getting out hand. Anytime I do anything without him, Im must have been some other dude. If I'm reading Reddit or playing on my phone, I must be texting some other dude. He shows up when I'm out on a girls' night even if he hates the restaurant. I actually just skipped my work Christmas party because we couldn't afford for both of us to go, and I didn't want to deal with the argument if I went without him. It's getting worse, and I don't know what to do about it. Edit this blew up, so I sat him down to talk when he got home tonight. He promised to stop accusing me of wanting to other guys. I promised to work on a few things I had been doing that bother him too, and we are both going to continue to work on communication. If things don't improve within a few months, I'm not worried about getting out. I own the house and everything is in my name, plus I have like 100 cop friends. If it came down to it, it won't. Thank you all for your concern. Im reading every reply and responding to as many as I can. Story 26. Well, I'm a bit late to this, but boy can I answer it. Just got out of a 4-year relationship with A. Last 2 years we had been living together. He was very honest about being divorced and still getting over it when we met. His reasons for the divorce were basically that as soon as they got married, she acted like a different person and never wanted to have with him. Wouldn't even have with him on their wedding night. Then, even though he was the one who was so unhappy and neglected, she's the one that filed for divorce. Then she cleaned him out, came by their house with all of his friends and took everything they owned. This is the story I was told, and I fully believed it. I thought she was such a cut to us living together. I went through some health problems that killed my drive and made absolutely excruciating for me. Are 2 to 10 times a day? Nope, not an exaggeration. Sometimes even more screech to a halt. He was not at all understanding, and I ended up giving in and just having with him most days, even though it was so painful sometimes I would cry. Of course that was my fault too. Apparently crying isn't sexy and really makes his sad. So doing that for months really damaged my idea of, and I still haven't completely recovered mentally in that aspect. It was at this point I started to realize that maybe she wasn't just refusing for no reason. Maybe it was the fact that he doesn't care to please the woman or even care if she's crying from pain. He just wants to get off at least once a day, and it's not his fault he has such a high drive. He could go cheat, so I should be happy to please him. Then we have the part where he claims he was the unhappy one, but she filed for divorce. Who the files for divorce if they're satisfied with the marriage? It couldn't possibly be his tendency to constantly be unhappy and blame it on her, or his mental and emotional abuse. It couldn't be the fact that even his mother warned me not to let him abuse me. It couldn't be his claims that he does all the work in life and the relationship, and that she does nothing. While he sleeps his days away, leaves dirty underwear and clothes strewn around for guests to step over, leaves dishes to sit and rot, doesn't take care of his body, doesn't make an effort or emotionally or romantically. Then, we have the part where she cleaned him out when she left. When I left, he offered to pay me for all the work I did on his house. I invested countless hours, weeks, months into fixing up his house he completely neglected. I removed old peeling wallpaper, fixed walls, painted, installed new light fixtures, put on new cabinet hardware throughout, bought very expensive backsplash tile, did some extreme landscaping projects. The list goes on and on. I said I wanted 1,000. He insisted on 3,000. 3,000 truly is a fair number. Doesn't even account for the labor aspect of things, which I of course would never want to be paid for. I also left him behind dishes, silverware, rugs, towels and sheets, curtains, things like that. Then what did he tell everyone? That I cleaned him out. I took everything and also took his money. Never mind the fact that I had to buy a new house, while he sat and didn't have to change anything because of the breakup. I had to live with friends for over a month because he wanted me and my son out of his house within a week of the breakup and changed the locks so I couldn't get my things or pack or see my dogs. Anyways, Never again will I date a man who is willing to trash his ex. He also said nice things about her, but he's such a convincing person that I didn't think he wouldn't be telling the truth. He has tons of friends and respect from people in our town, as he coaches athletes, myself being one of them. People are incapable of seeing how psychotic he is. His friends are nice, normal people. He preaches constantly about how others are living their lives wrong and how he only surrounds himself with quality people. Which he does have quality friends, they're just in a constant rotation because eventually his ego gets in the way. I wish he would change. Wish he would. When I read the letter her ex left her and found myself nodding in agreement the whole way through. I was cleaning out old files and she keeps it in the divorce file. No big drama, just basic incompatibility. Story 27. Probably the part before she was divorced and came on to me and hooked up with me. Should be no surprise that we are now divorced as she also cheated on me. Yeah, I should have known better. Story 28. A friend married a girl who was divorced. She was cute and well off. So what's the catch, right? Why would anyone leave her? She's very self-dependent. She doesn't need anyone or any help. She's set in her ways. The color she painted her house, her design style, etc. She's earned her money and wants to spend it her way. My friend is super laid back, go with the flow, doesn't care, etc. They are great. She calls the shots, and he's along for the ride. Story 29. Not entirely the same, doesn't involve divorce. Just the end of a relationship. But my husband used to tell me all the weird things his ex used to do, like hiding from his parents. Now, I too hide from his parents. Nightmare. Our pastor told us that maybe a reason second marriages fail is because the person may easily point the finger at the ex-spouse for the failure of the first marriage without wanting to take any of the blame or being willing to change. So they take all their personal issues into the second marriage and don't want to change, and that can cause the same problems in the second marriage. Interesting thought. Story 30. In all seriousness, sometimes people just don't click and don't marry the right people. I haven't seen any noticeable trends between divorcees and people who have never been married. The assumption of this question is that something is wrong with divorcees, and that's simply just not the case. Story 31. Never married or dated a divorcee, but I worked with a woman named Alice who was. We worked in a restaurant. I was a hostess. She seemed kind at first. But one day I sat one of her regulars in someone else's section and she had a very angry half-hour conversation in which she recited clitched, intimidating one-liners trying to scare me into quitting and calling me new girl instead of my name. I calmly told her that if I knew these people were her regulars, I would have sat them in her section, but since they didn't mention it, I followed the seating chart. Alice wasn't having it. I've been working here for 12 years. I know most of the people who walk in here and where they want to sit. Okay, Alice, good for you, but it's my third day, so I haven't exactly memorized everyone's regulars yet. And if they don't ask to be seated with you, then there's nothing I can do. I can't read minds. She went off. Keep in mind I was in my early 20s and she was about 35, yelling in the middle of the empty restaurant. Hosts came in a few hours early on the weekend to roll a few buckets of silverware for the servers, and she came in at that time just to tell me this. This whole story is a huge mess, I know, and thanks for sticking with me, I guess. My point is, Alice, if this was how you spoke to your husband, I see why he stopped liking you. Edit. Oh, this is about the other side. How did I miss that? My wonderful second wife would say that our marriage has been great except that I started out with serious trust problems, especially financially. See below for why. My divorce was coming from the day we got married. We were young and dumb, and I didn't care to put any effort into anything, so I just decided to marry the one girl that I had a decent relationship with. Well, on a tour to Iraq, her unemployed decided to spend a half-month's worth of my pay on glamour shots with her friends. I was fuming and said to myself that I would divorce her there and then. Well, I calmed down, and she promised to change. 2 years later, she hasn't changed. She still has a mentality that money is meant to be spent, and a credit card not maxed is a credit card wasted. She looked at me, on the way to her hormone therapy, because she's infertile, that she wanted to sleep with other guys. I agreed since I also was unhappy with our marriage, but I set terms. No seeing the same person twice, not in our house, and no feelings. Well, a week later, she tells me that she found a guy and she's enamored with him. He treats her the way I used to. She wants to do it with him, but his roommate is always home and won't let them. She asked me if she can do him on my bed. On my bed. Of course, I rejected the request, and I told her to her face that we cannot be married anymore. I had orders overseas 2 months later, so I canceled her side of the orders and sought out legal help. She pleaded for me to stay, saying that we always were better after deployments, so this would be another of those. I said that's a terrible recipe for a relationship and we're done. Good riddance. TLDR. Gold digger thought she could find a man, and I'd be too beta to leave her. Story 32. I recently dated a girl that had just come off a marriage with a man. She wanted to try women, and we went out a couple times and started dating. When we had, she was very aggressive, but one time she straight up started hitting me over and over again. I told her to stop, and she kept on hitting harder and harder. I eventually broke her off of me and locked myself in the bathroom, calling the cops and waiting till they arrived. Apparently, she had a criminal record, and her husband had divorced her for hitting him when he would come home from work and just always trying to beat him up in his sleep. Pretty wacky. Pretty. Story 33. Yep. I was dating my husband when his ex came back and said she was 6 months pregnant. I stepped out of the picture entirely because I thought that if they had a chance to work it out, it would be best. Fast forward a few years and he messages me on MySpace. Him getting old, I asked him how his family was, and turned out she cheated and left him alone with the baby. We got back together and married shortly after the divorce was final, which took 5 years, and we had another baby on the way. Now I have to mediate Skype sessions with my daughter and her bio mom. Birch was nuts. She got really offended that my daughter called me mom, and she stopped Skyping, sending cards, or any gifts. It was obvious that she didn't want or was capable of loving her own child. How could she have ever loved my husband? Then, I found out that she had wanted a late-term abortion, at 7 months. Preemies live at like 5 months. They would have cut my daughter up alive and removed her piece by piece. And she wanted that. I mean, I am pro-choice, but you have to take care of that before it becomes an actual baby. Who would do that? She is a cold-hearted and so selfish. She did ask for custody because her mother wanted to get more welfare. The judge laughed in her face. Thank God we broke that awful cycle by raising my daughter in a loving household. We are finally getting child support. She's 12, and bio mom fought it the whole time. Story 34. My realization was less about my spouse and more about my mother-in-law. My MIL behaved sweetly before we were married, but didn't bother keeping up the facade after. Her tactics are so intrusive that I've realized that my spouse's previous marriage probably never had a chance. They married relatively young, and I couldn't imagine anyone that young dealing with a seasoned aggressor like my MIL. Her interjections have been a huge stressor. Luckily, my spouse makes a conscious decision to support me instead of her, which has created a new set of problems because she tries to isolate me now when unleashing. If my spouse and I weren't as compatible as we are, I'm not sure our relationship would have survived my MIL. Story 35. My ex-wife cheated on me. A lot. The first few times I was devastated but remained in the marriage for our kids. I'm not sure if it was 5 or 6 where I just decided it was enough. This was years ago, and am so much better off, though my kids are forever marred by the experience. Cut to about 6 years after we had separated. She's still with the last guy she cheated on me with. She actually had the gall to text me about how upset she was because he cheated on her several times and she just couldn't get over it. My only response was, I can totally relate. Bet it sucks. This was after years of her convincing me that it's only just physical. No big deal. Yeah, right. Story 36. I dated a divorcee. She had seemed to quickly start dating a handsome, inspiring heart of gold young man, not long after the divorce, one she had been working with closely on her job. She denied cheating, but I feel like her personality was one that would take any cheating to the grave. Saving face and reputation were extremely important to her. I entered the scene maybe 3 months after said handsome young man broke her heart and moved across the country 2 to 3 years after the divorce. Suffice it to say, although she was very good at going through the motions and appearing to care about me, she was still very much hung up on this young gentleman under the surface. I didn't realize it at the time. I was very much head over heels and not mature experienced enough to have a sense of these types of situations. She's not evil per se, but kind of a shitty move to enter the dating pool when one is not yet emotionally available. All too common for people to do. Story 37. I dated a guy briefly after my divorce. He just got half custody of his kids after not seeing them for almost 2 years. He said it was because his ex was psychotic. Apparently she left him on his birthday and just disappeared for no reason. He went on about how outrageous the child support was that he was expected to pay, etc. He called her a dirty yoga-loving hippie and said she was just totally out there crazy. Whatever, lots of guys say this kind of stuff, so I sort of just brushed past it, thinking he was a little jilted. He kept on trying to get me to come over and sleep there when he had his kids there. His kids he supposedly hadn't seen in 2 years. I kept telling him it was inappropriate because I had never met his kids, and I thought they shouldn't see some woman coming over who he never met. I said I wouldn't do it to my kids, so I didn't want to do it to his kids. He kept insisting they were cool. They would just be playing their new Xbox all night. They were 8 and 6. He kept telling me he wanted to have more children one day, and that I seemed like a great woman to have kids with. We had only been going on dates about 3 weeks. Then, after I began to get suspicious, I did one Google search and found a whole blog written by his ex-wife. It went on and on about how abusive he was and how she was determined to keep their kids from it. She used yoga as a meditative release and talked about it in her blog. Her story just seemed so much more believable, and family members were commenting on it, telling her how far she'd come after everything she had to endure. His story was always changing, and he seemed to get visibly agitated when talking about it, but I was never the one to bring it up. I read in the blog about his vasectomy and then just ghosted him after that. He told me he was ready to have more children ASAP. He was just such a pathological liar, and I feel so sad for his kids. Just basically everything that came out of his mouth was a self-serving lie, and I don't blame her for divorcing him. No thanks. Story 38. I dated a divorcee from 20 to 25. She was 27 when we met, and I regret not marrying her. She had a kid, and I wasn't prepared to start that life at that time. I wish I had been more mature and stepped up. She was actually the perfect woman. She cooked decently, whereas I cannot. She was good with money, had her own friends, and we were compatible. And dating for 5 years, she never even once exhibited any toxic traits when in any kind of argument. If anything, her geography just didn't work out because I got a job in NY and she was on the West Coast. Now 12 years later, I wish I had stayed with her on the West Coast instead of moving away and breaking up. She is now remarried. Seems like her new guy is a good dude. Story 39. I married my high school sweetheart. She was divorcing her husband because he wanted an open marriage, which she absolutely didn't want. Occasionally during my marriage, she would bring up how her ex would call her a liar and try to reinforce how honest and straightforward she is. After 7 years of marriage and suspecting at times she was cheating on me, which I convinced myself absolutely not. If she wanted to sleep with other guys, she would have stayed in an open marriage. I finally found concrete proof she was cheating. She lied to me several times in order to take trips to see this guy. I talked to her ex-husband, found out she had done 3 ways with his brother, slept with her best friend's husband, and had several other relationships going on while she was married to him. He brought up the open marriage thing because he didn't care about her having with other people. He just didn't want her to lie to him anymore. Yeah, at the end of everything, I wasn't mad about the cheating either. It was definitely the lying. There wasn't anything she wasn't willing to cover up with a lie. Story 40. When I found out she was the real-life version Lucille Ball. She was a sweetheart, and I'll always love her, but holy was she disastrous. And it was never on purpose, just naturally oblivious to the world and her surroundings. She literally flooded my house the 4th or 5th day she was there. And that was just the start. Story 41. I did not marry one, nor did I properly date her. But we were spending a lot of time together, and we hooked up a couple of times. Thee is an amazing person, but overly sensitive. I always felt like I need to watch out every word that I say just not to insult her or make her feel bad. Too bad though, I actually wanted to try something with her, but I realized that I do not want to spend my life next to someone with who I will always have to censor myself. Story 42. Not me, my good friend. I worked with his wife White. She was married to her first husband. She was a pain in the entitled lazy and always whinging. I hated working with her. As her first marriage broke down, my pal became the shoulder to cry on as we worked in different parts of the same building, and he ignored my advice to keep away as she's just stressed. Her husband is a who doesn't treat her right. Skip ahead 9 years, and my friend has left her twice but gone back hard to walk out when you've got a kid, and complains she's a lazy, entitled, whinging pain in the has been for years, he says, but to quote him, he also stays for dat. Story 43. Wife and I both threw out our abusive ex and married each other with a unique perspective on what constitutes abuse. We treat each other like royalty. Story 44. Like a month or two ago, it all clicked. Currently stuck. She's the passive-aggressive, manipulative queen. Currently saving money so my daughter and I can get us our own place. I just have a knack for picking this kind of woman. I plan on not dating anymore. Story 45. I met my current wife when she was in the process of divorcing. We both involved in a local organization and saw each other a lot. I knew she was married, so I didn't ask her it or anything, but eventually she let out that she was moving into her own place, which got me thinking about a good way to ask her out. I figured if she was in the process of divorcing, it was cool. She finalized the paperwork while we were dating, and I took her out to celebrate. Got married ourselves a couple of years later, and I'd say it's been going pretty well so far. Story 46. When I was certain she was having an affair, and then she claimed to be, then moved across country to be with the man she was having an affair with, then moved back across country to be with another man I introduced her to via Xbox Live after the other guy left her, all while I was paying both of our bills. We were legally separated and just waiting for the divorce to be approved, but in the military's eyes, I was still responsible for her. I started to realize there was a reason she was 22, I was 25 at the time, and was on her third husband. Story 47. It took me years. I was husband number 3. I should have known that someone who gets married 3 times by age 35 probably has a few areas for improvement. Story 48. I dated a divorcee who described her ex-husband as emotionally abusive and controlling. Her example was that he gave her a monthly allowance and controlled all of the family's finances while she didn't even have direct access to the money she made because he made her direct deposit it into his account. A few months down the road, I realized why things were that way. She was god-awful with money, like irresponsible. Her cell phone was turned off multiple times because she forgot to pay the bill. She almost got evicted and had to beg an extension on her rent to get it paid. She spent hundreds on non-refundable plane tickets for a vacation that she ended up canceling due to not being able to afford the rest of the trip. And so on. She had no budget skills and an everything-will-work-out mentality. Sometimes everything will work out meant borrowing money from someone including me, including her father, including her siblings. She wasn't mean-spirited or greedy about it. She wasn't intentionally using people, but she was subtly backdoor using people by being so airheaded and irresponsible with money. She didn't understand somehow anything about money. She had auto bill pay set up so that she wouldn't miss her bills. Then she would pull hundreds in cash out because money keeps going missing from my account. And then her bills wouldn't get paid because there was no money in her account. After the service got shut off, she'd go pay it in cash. So I understood what probably happened in her marriage. She was so irresponsible with money that her husband put his foot down. I suspect that he tried to set up rules to help her, and the marriage. Direct deposit her paycheck and auto-pay the bills, leaving her with a limited amount of cash, the cash she could afford to spend in order to make things work on a proper budget. You get $700 in cash to spend this month. All other money is directed to bills turned into Hez, only giving me an allowance like I'm a child. You don't know how to handle your own finances turned into him being emotionally abusive? Of course, I don't know how he was for sure. Never met the guy. Maybe he was in... But I can see why their marriage failed, why he divorced her. Despite being a generally good and kind person, she was just straight up moronic when it came to money. Combined with an airheaded and naive life works out, no worries, be happy personality, she never learned that doing things like waiting until things were shut off to pay them were bad. I ended up breaking off after she forgot about $400 I lent her when she needed to borrow another $200 to pay some other bill. And I honestly don't think she was lying. I think she generally forgot. 2 months had passed, and I think that without me reminding her of it consistently because I didn't want to be that it just faded away in her mind. She got upset that I wouldn't lend her just another couple $100. I realized I could never be with someone who was just that bad with money. I couldn't raise kids with someone that bad with money. I couldn't build for a retirement with someone that bad with money, so I broke it off. She wasn't a bad person. She didn't cheat or steal. She wasn't generally an idiot with most things. She just had a massive blind spot when it came to money, budgeting, and the awareness around the consequences of her actions. Story 49. When my ex put down alcoholics, even though I came from a long line of alcoholics and he knew that. When I finally was admitted that my life was unmanageable and I was an alcoholic, he didn't take me seriously. In fact, he denied my feelings, stating, "You're no way anything like them. just slow down, which eventually led to opioid abuse. Anyways, people who don't take a hand reaching out and help them are always a glaring red flag. Story 50. It wasn't so much that she was a divorcee, but that the number of guys she dated and slept with was uncountable. I mean, she dated the same guy twice several years apart and didn't remember dating him before until the second date of the second time around. Any man she encountered, she would try to date if he was even mildly attractive. That's how I got a shot, because I'm probably average or a little under. She had also had so many partners that she couldn't count or remember them all. No problem there. I'm not a slut-shamer, but sometimes such things can be an indicator of other problems, and the other problems were as numerous as her past dating partners. It's a long story, but basically she was the personification of the old adage. If you think everyone in your life has been an AT, maybe you're the story. 51. Second hand. The person my ex-wife cheated with, both cheating on their current spouses at the time, me and his wife. His ex contacted me that it wouldn't be his last venture into cheating, noting a family history of it, hinting at how they kept it in the family. Yeah, that's exactly what I mean. Well, he eventually cheated on my ex too, with our own daughter. I wanted to kill him both times I found out. But where would that land me? Years of legal trouble defending myself. I still wish I had the first time. Then the second time would have never happened. I feel responsible for that in a way. Plus, there were signs, but I couldn't get my daughter to be honest with me. That kind of hurt too. Thankfully, she told a close friend who then alerted the authorities. Guy confessed, but has been out of bond now for over 18 months awaiting trial. Once again, I find myself wishing I had taken care of it the night I received the news. To make matters worse, my ex claims our daughter both asked for it and should you known better, at 10 years of age. Ridiculous argument at any age, but she still maintains it's both of their faults. She plans to stay with the creep too. Story 52. My husband's ex presented in custody court that he is a narcissist. That floored me. He is not narc. He is just on the autism spectrum. She couldn't control every single thing about him and couldn't handle that. After the court, we won custody and she pays child support and health insurance. About 5 years ago, the boys thanked me for teaching their mom how to be a mom. Pretty insightful for 10 and 12-year-olds. She was blatantly one-upping me every time she found out I was doing anything for them. Which was a lot, since I was the primary and helping to raise them. We had a giggle and started using it to the boys' advantage because we knew she read their texts when they were asleep. Yes, I know it was immature, but she put us through literal for years. Example. My stepson would text me, I need new shoes for the courts. They have to be white, and the coach said, we are switching to Adidas this year. I'd reply, okay, well, pick them up this weekend. Their mom was a dedicated Goodwill shopper prior to losing custody. Within 1 to 2 days, my stepson had his new shoes, bought retail. She was not going to let me buy them, even though he'd been buying all their clothes for years. She changed after losing custody, her open to the fact that another woman had been mothering her boys. We used that strategy for about a year, and it was like Xmas all the time, haha. But she got so upset at our relationship that the boys finally had to lock their phones. Now we barely hear from her. She's more like a mosquito than a tick these days. Oh, and my husband founded another biotech. Life is sweet. It's my experience that everyone has a divorceable flaw. This has a lot to do with the degree to which I wish to put up with that flaw. As I aged, my understanding of how to deal with many common flaws in people, as well as bettering understanding myself, led to a greater tolerance of my mates and their flaws. For some people, that takes 3 marriages. For others, it's innate. Story 53. When his behavior became incredibly unkind, just a few months into my pregnancy, I asked him to handle cleaning up the bathroom because I was feeling incredibly ill, and just the thought of cleaning supplies made it worse. He, in front of his teenage son, started mocking me and saying, wow, already playing the pregnancy card, huh? Remind me, how many more months of this do I have to look forward to? All the while yucking it up with his son as they both laughed at me. Things like this became typical. I reminded him about something I asked him to pick up at the store, and he said, why don't you crawl out of my... Again, having another hilarious bonding moment with his son. Yet another time, I asked him what sort of groceries he wanted me to get when I went shopping. He said with a disgusting condescending tone, protein, produce, milk. Do you really need it spelled out for you? When we were nearing the end of our marriage and me the end of my rope, I tried reasoning with him and telling him how it would help me feel loved if he asked about things that he knew were going on during the day while he was at work appointments, me taking the kids to the mall, etc. He got in my face and said sternly, "It's not my job to validate your low self-esteem." That was the moment that it really clicked for me. There was a very real reason that I was his third wife, and despite the number of times he told me this, my inability to take a joke wasn't the cause of our problems. Story 54. Dated my ex-husband for 3 years before we married, and I never once suspected he was an abusive man. Got married, and within a year's time, I'd had my right top and incisor front tooth knocked out because he got angry with me over dinner. Divorced him so fast your head would swim, and stayed purposely single the rest of my life. I thought I knew him, and could never trust men fully again. Story 55. So, reading through some of the comments here. Not everyone in the marriage is a cheater leading to a divorce. I became a divorced person after my husband not only cheated with prostitutes, found out through a good friend's husband in law enforcement, and yes, I had every single STD test run available for a full year after he left the marriage. It's called cruelty and abandonment, leaving our 3 small children, and was beating me regularly. I thought I could take it classic isolation techniques of an abuser, divide and conquer the victim until he started hitting our children. At that point, I knew I had to get my children and myself out of that situation now. It wasn't easy. It did change all of us. However, we survived. Counseling helped. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Story 56. I did not marry her, but I dated a divorcee, no kids. Her ex had been abusive, she had had a broken nose, but she was awesome, smart, had a Costco membership, played volleyball, and was learning piano with a great job. She was looking for marriage ASAP, otherwise we may have continued dating and who knows. I dated another divorcee who was also amazing in her own way and had a security clearance, so possibly amazing in ways I did not know. She played SC2 with me, indicating lots of patience. We ended up going different directions, but had things gone a bit differently, we might still be together. I would not necessarily paint divorcees as high-strung crazy cheaters. Story 57. This isn't strictly in line with the question, but it involved me almost telling the next guy what he was in for and how his marriage to her would end. The first things people will ask you are, what is your name? What do you do for a job? Are you married? These are the major things which define you. Well, I wasn't smart enough to understand she didn't love me. She just couldn't stand to be alone, which I mistook for love. She couldn't stand to be alone so much. She couldn't stand for me to have a job and be away from her for 9 to 12 hours a day. No, that's not rational, but that's the way I finally figured out and accepted that it was. For her part, she felt she was blameless in loving me so much. So, to her, it was pick one, what do you do for a job, or are you married? Each time I was up for promotion, she was sick of how my job took me away from her most days. It was either her or the jobs. And yes, I know working too much is a form of neglect abuse and can sabotage a marriage, and am not defending that. I wish it were possible to work part-time and make ends meet and get promotions and still work only part-time and have plenty of money. It's not. I refused to quit a job finally, stating that we needed to work this out. She divorced me. The guy she married, very shortly afterwards, angrily confronted me about the abuse. He never used any specifics, so I don't know what she told him. There was no way to rationalize with this guy, so I couldn't tell him what he was in for, even though he seemed like a nice guy. They were both Christians, so of course divorce was unjustified in the absence of abuse and/or cheating. So in a divorce, the righteous accusations of divorce and/or cheating were a necessary addition justification, even though I live in a no-fault state and the law doesn't need this to okay a divorce. Personally, I can't see that it adds any value to the divorce process. After he lost several jobs and tried to arrange for them to both work at the same place and failed, they divorced, with each accusing the other of abuse and cheating. Story 58. My second wife was divorced, as was I. We had a wonderful life together for 16 years. She was the love of my life, and she said the same of me for her. We both were miserable and abused in our first marriages. We were ridiculously happy for 16 years. She passed away 6 years ago. Life is too short not to be happy. Story 59. A guy I worked with left his family for a new woman. He confided in me that he had made a huge mistake. Apparently, his new partner would lay in bed hitting herself in the head. Story 60. Didn't marry, but dated a divorcee. It was 100 his fault in my eyes, until she got too drunk to take care of her own infant, and I had to get him back to sleep. Then, the trip to rehab where she was told she drank to self-medicate her anxiety. To her, that meant she didn't have a drinking problem, so she got drunk the night she left rehab. That was when I decided I'd had enough. Story 61. I really shouldn't have read through this thread. My mom divorced my dad about 10 years ago and remarried almost immediately an older man who was divorced 3 other times. My dad did some research into this guy's past, and he apparently faked his death to his first wife and emptied the bank account of his second and third wife as he left in the middle of the night. My dad tried to prevent my mom from marrying him, accepted the divorce, but still wanted to make sure she wasn't going into something bad. The guy promised my mom trips around the world, going out to nice dinners and plays and all that jazz. Once things were official, that stuff never happened, and he demanded my mom only ever eat salads. She is now afraid of trying to divorce him because she thinks he'll take everything from her, which seems true. Our entire family told her to stay away, but she didn't listen. I was so upset over it, I didn't talk to her for 2 years. If anyone has any advice for things I can get her to do, that would be appreciated. Story 62. It's too bad that this comment will never be read. I'm late getting in on this. But after my divorce, I was 21. He was 23. And we tried to make it work as friends. The first time he brought the future Mrs. XXXXX to my apartment to meet me, I was so happy to meet her. I gave her a makeover, I did her hair, and I did knot it up. I prepared a welcome wagon basket. I was truly happy. Skip forward 10 years, they are divorcing. And she tells me that if she knew then in life what she now knew, she would have ran at meeting an ex that was so happy to meet her. Her words, I would have ran so fast, I would have left my purse behind. It's just stuff. Story 63. I realized the reason when he point-blank told me why they divorced. She was cheating on him while he was deployed. She was caught with another soldier on base when they tried to inform her that her husband was gravely injured. Pretty cut and dry to me. Story 64. I'm dating a divorcee right now. We met while she was married to a Navy guy. We are from the same hometown, so it was weird we met out of state. I'm also former military, just Mott Navy. They married out of college when he enlisted. That story is about as common as they come in the military. Then she ended up living with another military guy for a few years, and things with him fell apart as well, so she ended up moving back to our hometown. About 6 months later, I moved back and we reconnected. I showed some interest in her, and eventually we started dating. She seems to have a habit of rushing headlong into long-term relationships. She's kind of clingy, but she does so much for me. I have to tell her to stop doing my laundry when she comes to visit, etc. It's not even a lot of laundry, just clothes from the week type stuff. So if I had to guess, it's that she rushes into relationships with guys without knowing them very well. Then she is a little judgmental about certain things which she should have learned about before she got so involved. She also has a major issue with the very concept of masturbation. Like no man she's with can do it. That's something we were able to work out, but it shows she can be a bit demanding of her partners conforming to her needs and vice versa. When I started talking to her to find compromises, it took her by surprise, as if every decision made in her previous relationships had been ultimatums one way or the other. Luckily, she's been willing to realize just how messed up that perspective can be. Story 65. I've been dating a divorcee for just under 3 years now, and we've been living together for the last 2. She divorced her husband because, as she got older and wiser, she realized that he was a controlling, emotionally abusive, manipulative liar. The final straw was when he had a breakdown, trashed the house, and threatened her and himself. He has since sought help and has moved out of state, back with near his family. Hopefully, he's making his life better for himself. She, on the other hand, is the most amazing, funny, kind, and intelligent person I know. She has made me a better man, not through her desire or coercion, but just by being who she is. She sets a standard that I want to live up to. I want to deserve her. I trust her implicitly, and that's a first in a really long time. We never fight. We don't start for no reason. And when we get mad at each other, we quickly realize that it's not without good reason, and we talk about it. And TBF, it's usually her being mad disappointed with me, rarely the other way around. Sorry this doesn't fit the bill of OP's question, but I thought it would be a good place to share that there are the occasional good stories too. Not that anyone is likely to actually see this. Story 66. My dad was married 7 times. My mom was his 6th. When my mom divorced him, he came to me a couple months later and introduced me to the new women in his life. He quietly asked me not to mention how many times he was married before. He told her he was only married 3 times before, as if that wasn't still a huge red flag. Story 67. My current wife is my second and am her third. Her thing is don't lie to her face, but she'll lie all the time if it's in a phone conversation or a text to other family or friends, especially if she doesn't want to do something or go somewhere. Me, on the other hand, she says ill lie by omission, meaning I won't tell her all the facts. The way I see it, I'm a private person, and I'm not comfortable telling her everything I do. Story 68. There was 2 big moments that caused things to finally take their course. So just as a little background. We were married for 7 years total with no kids. We also live in San Francisco on just my salary. She only worked maybe a total 6 to 9 months of that. Small jobs, like a few months here and there. One of her jobs I even got for her because she couldn't be bothered with searching for a job. While she donated countless hours to moderating on Imgur for free. I didn't originally have an issue with no job as long as she did the housework. That is a full-time job, and I was okay with that arrangement. Except she rarely cleaned. So rarely. I mean, once every few months, she would do some cleaning. But only after I would get super pissed and yell about the condition of the apartment. I got fed up and told her I couldn't take it anymore, and we needed to separate for a while so I can figure things out. I said I needed a month. So I sent her on an all-expenses-paid trip to visit a friend in another country for almost 2 months. During that time, I cleaned the out of the apartment. Looking back, I still can't believe how disgusting it was. She's a bit of a hoarder. I was finding that boggled my mind. For 3 weeks straight, I cleaned top to bottom while still working tech startup hours and still finding time to go out with friends to the bar. Before she returned, I told her how much I cleaned and that this was her last chance. She needed to get her together and fast. She agreed and we had this 90 plan. I picked her up at the airport, and within 5 minutes of being in the apartment, she just tossed her everywhere. I got home from work the next day, and I was downright shocked at how bad it was. And a week later, it was 30 of the way back to where it was. That is when I realized it was over and couldn't be salvaged. Yes, we did couples counseling. She just zoned out during it. The second part is when I decided to actually do something about it. I started to transition MTF and decided to reevaluate everything in my life. I mean everything. From the foods I ate, the friends I had, the Facebook friends I had, the 7-year fight with my sister, my health, and my marriage. I quickly realized that I needed to remove all of the toxic elements out of my life. After a multi-day episode of crying on my friend's shoulders, I came home very calmly and explained to her that it's over and she will be receiving paperwork within a few days. She knew it was over because in all the previous times I was very angry and wanted her to move out. But I had a plan with move-out dates and whatnot. For the first time, she knew I was serious. She asked for more time and chances. But I explained that we are far past that point. I needed to take care of me. It took another 8 months to get her moved out and get the divorce finalized. I had to move all of her stuff. I had friends help me, but it took forever because I had to sort through everything. She barely lifted a finger and just left to move into a mutual friend's place. I also lost a metric load of money in the divorce, and that part hurts me the most. I procrastinated divorce and starting my transition, so I paid the price. I am much happier now. I have just started dating again, but I have new rules in my life as a result of this incident. 1. Only poly relationships with no attachments. 2. I will never ever again put someone else's name on my money. 3. I will never ever again get married. 4. I won't date someone who won't work. 5. I won't date someone who can't pick up after themselves. Story 69. Not me, but my dad married a woman who had been divorced 4 times before. I think he realized he made a mistake when he learned that she'd been divorced 4 times before. Shed lied and said it was only once. Story 70. I think some people are not capable of loving themselves. They jump from one relationship to another to fill some sort of void. When the passion runs out and the hard work begins for a true relationship, they look for more passion because that's the easy part. Whatever or whomever comes along and is convenient. Why work on yourself to be better when you can sucker in someone else and get a piece of that same satisfaction hearing it told to you? This can apply to dating or marriages. You are always left wondering what was real, what was said in the heat of the moment because it sounded nice. But we all have our flaws, divorced or never married. I dislike this question because it implies that someone once divorced isn't capable or having a successful marriage and keeps bringing these flaws with them. True relationships work when you love someone despite or because of their flaws, the ones you see and the ones you don't see. If someone up a relationship prior, that has no bearing on how you should feel about then going forward. The reasons you want to marry then is because those flaws help make them. And you love that person fuck you or not. Story 71. I am a divorced man, evil ex-wife, cheated that dated a divorced woman. Everything started out fine for a few months and I asked why she was divorced. I got a long story that really didn't go anywhere or make any sense. Found out she moved from her house that was paid for in Florida to renting a condo in Orange County in a very nice area. Talked to her ex that would call and check in with her all the time when she was out, and we started talking about her issues I was at the time unaware of. He told me she was a major hypochondriac and had every cold, flu, and disease known to mankind. She slowly started showing signs of slipping back into her old ways. You name it, she had symptoms. It got so ridiculous I asked if she even had testicular cancer, which sent her over the edge. She wouldn't get out of bed, and I would serve her here food and drinks in bed along with all the housework and her dogs. I told her that I'm a 40-year-old man getting out of a horrible marriage and I was ready to live again, and she was happy not getting out of bed for weeks on end because of fake illnesses. Even her doctor said it was all in her head. One night I told her it was over, and that didn't go over well. She took my loaded .45 from under my pillow and put it to her head and said, "Why don't you go ahead and kill me?" Exit stage left. I grabbed the gun out of her hand, ran out the door, and dialed 911 and told the operator what just happened. The operator told me to go back in the house and try to calm her down, and I said no. She's got her own guns in the house. As I was waiting for the cops to show up, I told the 911 operator that when the police arrive, there's a large man in boxers and a t-shirt holding a .45 outside the house and not to shoot because it was me. Well, it must have been a slow night because I was visited by at least 15 officers and one helicopter circling and telling her to come out of the house with her hands in plain sight. I had to explain to the cops what happened at least 10 different times, and then they finally took her and placed her on a 5150 hold. I had to move quick. I moved all my stuff out of there and stayed in a hotel for a while until I got my own apartment. Called her parents and told them where she was and what had happened, and also called her ex, and they both said again. They flew out to get her, but she refused to go back to Florida with them. She tried calling and texting me, but I didn't want anything to do with her after that. I told her if she tried contacting me again, I would file a restraining order, and I never heard from her again. Wasted 6 months of my life with that wacko. Story 72. I'm the divorced partner in our marriage. My now wife had been in a long-term relationship previously, but never really wanted to marry him. I have sundry and manifold faults, but I'm absolutely certain that the fault of the death of my first marriage can't be laid at my door. I did everything I could think of to save it, and worked hard to redeem things for a couple of years, even when it was clear to both of us that things were utterly broken. We married young. I knew she had mental health problems, major bipolar affective disorder, but thought that the right thing to do was to stand by her. It didn't help that there was a mutual dislike, nay hatred, between me and her parents. They hated me for taking their little girl, 25-year-old soldier, away from them. I detested them for numerous reasons, including, but not exclusive to, her dad being caught with CP on his computer, them being involved in very shady swinging activities, and mainly the fact that they were both extremely unpleasant to each other and everyone else they came across. After about 9 years or so, I just couldn't cope with being her carer more than her husband, all the while being constantly vilified for trying to be a good human and a good husband. The last straws were twofold. I gave up alcohol for Lent, and her parents, both of whom were our rampant alcoholics, advised her to dump me, because if he has to make a big deal to give up booze, he's an alcoholic, and the moment I realized that, despite her penchant for getting payday loans in my name while in the grip of a bipolar episode, I was actually debt-free. The couple of times she'd cheated on me didn't even have a bearing at the time. Since then, sheesh. I still regret not being strong enough to stand by our marriage vows, but I just couldn't take any more. I'm now very happily married to a wonderful woman that I wish he'd met many years ago. We both bear the scars of old relationships that were unhealthy, but we've been building a great life together for the past 4 years, 51 weeks, and 2 days. It's not perfect, no relationship ever will be, but it's pretty amazing nonetheless. Every day I wake up with a smile and a determination that I'll bring that smile to her face too. Most days I succeed. Not every divorce is a cheating, lying. Some of us just rolled with the punches and made the best of the bad situation that we landed ourselves in. To answer the question, please ask Mrs. Tuba Player 79. I hope she says nice things about me. Story 73. Not an ex-wife, but my husband does have 2 ex-fiancés. The first slept with his best friend. The second, they dealt with conflict much differently than he and I do. It was never going to last. That and she had an affair with his dad. I suppose that didn't help. Story 74. If you do date or marry someone that has been divorced, you absolutely must not use their past relationship as something to look for faults in the current one. A recipe for failure. My wife has her faults. She was married before, but overall, we have been happily married for over 10 years. It's similar to someone that wasn't married but dated for a long time. Don't do the comparison thing. Story 75. My friend got divorced earlier this year. I know his ex really well. She's a nagging psychotic narcissist. She's the wife girlfriend from. When they decided to get divorced, my friend's dad asked me to go mediate with the couple. Since I know his ex really well, I went to speak with her alone. She was her usual self. She told me that her lawyer is a shark, and no matter what happens, she calls up her lawyer. Imagine a lawyer getting calls 247 every day from a person like that. Finally, after the divorce got finalized, all papers signed, the lawyer turned to my friend and said, I quote, "You're great for living with her for 2 years. Any man would have gone insane after a while." Story 76. When I realized she says yes to any possible adventure I propose. Let's move to Europe for a change of scene. It's happening in May. Let's go on holidays in Norway last summer. Let's learn how to snowboard. Did it this past winter. Let's buy rollerblades. I realized that she was wasted with the guy she was with, who wanted her to move to the suburbs and pop out babies for him. He was holding her back from the life she wanted to live. A life less ordinary. Story 77. My ex-husband was married to 2 different women before me. Everything seemed pretty good the first 4 years together. We had 2 children together. Decided to just go all in and get married, which was something I never thought I'd actually do. 5 months into the marriage, I needed to use his computer for something since mine was up, and found open Facebook messages where he was telling my cousin he was madly in love with her and was going to drop me and the kids and move in with her. I broke his computer. I was so mad. I hopped on my mother's computer at her place and printed his messages. His password was pretty easy to crack. I'd just never had a reason to use it before, and confronted him about it. He told me I seemed unhappy, so he was fixing the problem. Because he wouldn't let me take my antidepressants. Since depression was a bullshit made-up disease, I seemed unhappy. I asked his exes if he had done anything like this before, and they were just as clueless as I was, they said. Other than being unemployed and kind of an emotionally, the cheating thing was totally new. He came back a month later and told me we could make it work. Cousin threw him out because he refused to work, and I stupidly let him come back because children. I got a new job and tried to support us, but he started going through my every day telling me I was clearly cheating on him because I worked long hours. Came home to all my on the front lawn and him telling me to get out. He was keeping the kids since I was homeless now, and I could go stay with my non-existent lover. I ended up living in my car for a few weeks until a coworker and I got an apartment together. Here I am 5 years later with an awesome job, a great boyfriend, and my children living with me again. My ex-husband is homeless and finally relented and signed the divorce papers earlier this year, so that's done. He tells everyone I know I left because I was multiple other people and abandoned my kids, but some of his friends ran into me at work recently and said they figured it was all bullshit since they knew he had cheated on me and I'd never leave my kids willingly. It was a rough ride, but Story 78. I'm my husband's third wife. We have been married for almost 2 years. Our relationship in the beginning was intense and incredibly fast. We met online, talked for a couple weeks, he stayed the night the first time we ever met in person, moved in the next day, said I love you 2 weeks later, and were married 6 months later while 2 mo THS pregnant with our daughter. He was with his first wife for 5 years and had 2 children, with his second wife for about 6 months and maybe has one child with her. His first marriage fell apart because she put her parents and sister before him. Okay, understandable. When asked why, he said that she was always accusing him of caring more about video games and being selfish and somewhat controlling and always turning things around to place blame on her. But she was definitely the problem because she would cancel dates that they'd have planned for months in advance to help her mom bake cookies for a bake sale, or just dumb stuff like she was trying to not spend time with him. The second ex-wife cheated on him every time he was away from home for work or would be gone for days at a time to spend time with her Aeon, who lived right down the road with her ex-husband. Very understandable. He said that she always accused him of, can you guess it, all the same stuff the first ex-wife did. Now I couldn't see what they were seeing. I was love-struck, and he had a few things that ticked me off. Always going through my phone while I slept, wanting to come with me while I was grocery shopping and calling all the time after I got off work, and he was still at work. I chalked it up to him loving me so much that he wanted to be around me all the time, and I kinda loved it. Every other guy I had ever dated was a complete dirtbag, so this was new and exciting, to be cared about like this. I ended up having to quit my job because at 6 months pregnant, married for 4 months, my nausea was off the charts, I was starting to swell, and it would be painful to move around. Doctor wanted me off my feet as much as possible because of some difficulties I was having. My husband would call me every 30 minutes. If I was lucky, he was busy and couldn't call me for an hour. But he messaged all throughout the day, and if I didn't message back fairly quickly, he would blow my phone up and ask what's going on. Somewhat understandable considering his second ex-wife. My oldest daughter comes and I almost died during childbirth. Husband gets even more incessant with the phone calls, but it's okay. He almost lost me. I understand. Baby is about a month old and I start noticing that he's going through my phone with a fine-tooth comb cross-checking with phone records. WTF. If I go anywhere and I don't answer my phone on the first ring, he freaks the out. Even doctor's appointments. He has to know where I'm going and how long it'll be, and when I get home, I get grilled on who I saw and what I said to people. It's finally starting to hit home what the ex-wives accused him of. He was all about where I was and what I was doing when I was away, but when I'm home, always on the video games, sparing me barely a thought or a glance. I have to beg him to watch our daughter for an hour so I can get a little rest. I haven't slept in what feels like days. We would argue, and no matter what the argument was about, it was my fault. I could say something offhand about how he left the toilet seat up and I fell in and it would start World War III, and he'd say, well, if I wouldn't keep asking him to watch the baby, maybe he wouldn't be so exhausted that he forgot to put the seat down. I'm a firm believer in married once, married always. Till death do us part means something to me. So when it started getting really bad, I put my foot down. I told him was going to change one way or another. Either he was going to stop pulling all the bullshit or I'd start pulling some of my own. I literally had to pack up all of mine and my child's things and pretend I was on the phone with my mom to come stay with her till we got on our feet for him to back the off. Thank God he never called me on my bluff. We now have a happy, healthy relationship after quite a few sessions of counseling. It doesn't always end bad. Story 79. It doesn't threaten my personality or masculinity to be with a mate who has a strong opinion and is willing to make me defend my positions. I'm comfortable being married to someone who is my equal in most ways and superior in some. Many men say they want looks and brains in their woman, but then can't take it when she develops different opinions than theirs. I'm not saying all men are misogynists, but it is troubling the number that are with many not even realizing it. Story 80. My dad is a 2, now 3-time divorcee, and his last ex-wife is a 5, now 6-time divorcee. They got married the same year I did, in 2000. I can understand why someone would divorce my dad as he's never wrong, even when given absolute proof, but my stepmom was nice up until the last few months before their divorce. It was like a switch flipped and she went crazy. She started getting mad at my dad for everything. One time when we were camping, my dad asked if she brought out the ketchup and she started yelling that she guessed she ruined dinner now and stormed off. One of her ex-husbands said that the same thing had happened with him. My guess is that she's bipolar and went off her meds. She hasn't contacted me once since the divorce. My kids miss their grandma, but there's nothing I can do about it. She hasn't answered any of my calls or texts. Story 81. I'm going through a divorce. I thought I had the perfect marriage and really did try to be a loving, fun, and supportive wife. Then one day, he tells me he's been cheating for years with many, many women, and then left me for the latest girl he's been cheating on me with. It scares me to get out in the dating world again because of the stigma of divorcees. He couldn't tell me anything I did wrong, yet I fear guys in the future will think I was the cause of this divorce, and that will scare some people away. It's still all new for me, but it's something I worry about. Edita word. Story 82. My husband had a serious relationship with a girl for about 4 years, engaged and all. She cheated on him with a guy who was in a live-in relationship with a mutual friend of ours. I lived in another state at the time. When I moved back to my hometown, we had a date pre-planned for when I got back. Slept together the first night. He asked me to marry him the first week. Said yes, of course. The ex got wind of this. We had moved out of state together within a month. She called his mother, who loved her very much, to get info, etc., etc. It is now almost 26 years later. We have 4 grown children and 4th grandchild on the way. So glad she was a ha 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 ha. This is a weirdly presumptuous loaded question. Who says the person you're with is in some way at fault for a divorce? People sometimes have bad chemistry and don't work well together and don't realize it until after marriage. I imagine more often than not. It's just that both parties don't work together. Literally all people in this world have potentially divorce-worthy flaws in them. Assuming that things you don't like about a person are the reason their partner before didn't work out ignores that all relationships are different and people have different quirks they can't stand. Story 83. She, in short, was one of those that changed as soon as the coast was clear. To establish a precedent, she was around 2 years out from the divorce when we started seeing each other. I was also underage age of consent, but not an adult at the time, which should have been a red flag, but for some reason it wasn't. I know. Sue me. Essentially, what happened is she turned from this super adoring, affectionate, loving, and kind person to cold and demanding. Whatever she did, she was trying to help me, even if it ended up in me crying my eyes out over something little. It was her way or the highway, and I so desperately tried to conform to everything she asked. I grew up too fast in a lot of ways. She also demanded complete and utter respect and honesty out of me when, upon talking to several of the other women she was talking to, she wasn't doing the same. Eventually we broke up the first time I know. Again, rookie mistake because her ex-wife started hanging around and I became friends with the ex-wife, which is funny because she asked me to be friends with the ex-wife for her sake. We still are really good friends actually. Still keep in touch with her today. Shout out to Tonya for being the realist. TLDR kids always befriend the ex-wife. Story 84. It was kinda about the time I realized she was my mate, and that she moved out with my kids, left me alone feeling sorry for myself. Then all my family died, and after the pain came the inheritance and stress-free living which came with it. I brought her out of the house, made all the changes she'd ever dreamed of, painted the place all the colors she'd hate with my new partner who was kind and caring and lived happily ever after. Amen. Story 85. So, X was cheating on me with a girl he met on Reddit. I was the one who paid the bills, made sure he was happy, and took care of him, all while in school. Anywho, he decided the long-distance relationship was more important than his relationship here. I found out about her via FB. He gifted her a used pair of boxers that I had purchased for his birthday one year. Romantic, I know. Anyways, he decided she was more important than I, literally for months. Everyone knew what he was doing and refused to tell me. He was abusive and controlling, but I loved him. As cliché as that is, she was asking for advice and referring to me as his roommate. Interesting, right? How he was telling me she was a friend, but she accepted that I was his roommate. Bwahaha. What's funny is now that I have moved on, I am happily married, started my own family, and with a man who worships the ground I walk on, it was a drastic change, and took some getting used to. X realized the grass isn't always greener on the other side. He has tried to message me, friend me on FB again. Why? He didn't give a when we were together, and always asks mutual friends about me. Karma. I've also learned that he refuses to work and his new woman is struggling paying the bills, which has led to them becoming homeless. Sorry, not sorry. Story 86. She told me that her ex-husband thinks she's the most selfish person he's ever met. I was like, what? No. Couldn't see it at the time. Turned out she's also the most selfish person I'd ever met too. Been divorced from her for 4 years now and couldn't be happier. She also remains blameless through both failed marriages. I learned a few things from that experience. I learned what a narcissist is, and when someone tips their hand like the selfish comment, believe them. Story 87. Everybody has their own list of deal breakers. Some people get married too early, or for the wrong reasons. Just because they got divorced doesn't make them damaged goods. It is possible for people to mature as a couple, realize they don't belong together, and part on decent terms. On the other hand, some people get divorced to leave a potentially harmful situation. That doesn't mean they were the cause of their divorce. We're not forcing people to walk around with scarlet letters. Story 88. The girl from high school that I had strong feelings for finally split up with her alcoholic ex, and we started talking about 6 months later. We decided to take it slow and try a long-distance relationship to see if it would work out. Things were going well, so she flew out to see me and stay for a couple days to see if we got along. We did, had a lot of fun, we enjoyed each other's company, and that was great. The following Monday after she got back home, she informed her ex-husband that she was going to move in with me and started official court proceedings to relocate her and her son to where I lived, without informing me of this, nor did we have any conversations regarding it. This caused us to have to meet up with a lawyer back in her state and deal with a pretty lengthy custody battle. That case came to a close and the judge pretty much said, if you move, you give up custody of your son, so she let it go. About a year later, I got a promotion with my company and moved out to California. Within months of me being there, she started the whole process again, and since I loved her so much regardless of all this, we got married so we would look like a more stable family and have a better shot in court if we had another trial. I busted and got a nice safe place in a great school district. When we got to court, her ex's lawyer brought up all these questionable things that she did right after the marriage that I didn't know about. Like leaving the country with her son to go see a guy in Canada, which she kept a secret from me and her ex. The case concluded and she lost custody of her son, so she moved out with me anyways. She then started to blame me for it, stating that I wasn't supportive enough, even though when her parents were on the stand, they pretty much called her out and said it was a bad idea too. She then started abusing prescription drugs and was constantly getting into trouble at work. She finally suggested that we move out of the nice place I had and move to one of the least safe places in the area, just to save money. I asked her about what she would do about her job, and she said that she would be quitting her job, and I should be supporting her anyways, because that's what good husbands do. After her moving into the other room and Snapchatting with a bunch of random dudes from work, I said I wanted a divorce, and she moved out that night, abandoned her cat with me, threw her house key in the bushes, and sped off like a maniac. Story 89. One of my favorite first date questions after we build some rapport, and if she seems too good to be true, like mega attractive, has her together on the surface, etc., is always, why are you single? We'll never understand why people don't just have open relationships or marriages and cut the bull. Story 90. A friend's uncle started dating a 2-time widow. Pretty odd to have widowed twice in your 50s. About a year later, he was on the hospital due to poisoning from automotive coolant. Yep. This crazy was killing her husbands and collecting the life insurance. Story 91. My wife and I are both divorcees. We were both the instigators of our divorces. They bathe a daughter together, so I've met her ex-AMD have to deal with him in a regular basis. Let's just say I can completely see why my sometimes overly sensitive sweetheart of a wife would have not wanted to stay with him. Story 92. Wife cheated on her first husband with second husband who after he cheated on her, she cheated on him with me. Then she cheated on me with 2 guys while I was deployed. I forgave her, now she hit me with a divorce last week and is taking my house. Story 93. Not exactly on topic, but a good friend of mine got a divorce, hooked up with another chick, and within a year started seeing the same problems from his first marriage. The unfortunate thing is he doesn't realize that in all his past relationships, he's the only common denominator. Story 94. We started dating in 2012, married in April 2016. He's my best friend and I can't for the life of me figure out why she left him. Her loss. I couldn't be happier. Story 95. We were both divorced once before we married. We realized pretty early on that maybe we both had some baggage we needed to figure out, since we were both treating each other like our former spouses when we would argue. Took a long time and some therapy, but we're both committed to making it work and both willing to examine our own shortcomings. Story 96. Late to the party, but here we go. Not me, but my brother. We live in different states, but visit each other often. I'm his sister, by the way. He started dating a girl. She was divorced and hadn't been in a long-term relationship for 8 years. I thought that was kind of weird. So they had been dating for about 6 months, and I had plans to fly up to my bro's house for a Halloween party he throws every year. He's super excited for me to meet her, tells me all the stuff he has planned for us to do during the week I'm there. When I get to his house, I kinda expected her to be there since from what my brother tells me, they are kinda inseparable at this point. She wasn't there. And long story short, she totally ghosted him the entire week I was there. She had a million excuses on missing everything he planned. And the grand finale was when she strung him along the night of his party, telling him on the way, then not showing up. Called him the next morning and dumped him. He was so confused why she went cold. I was like, duh, I'm here. I basically told him, if she calls you after I leave, do not give her a second chance. And sure as the day after I left, she starts calling and texting wanting to talk. His stupid did, and it took him another month to figure out she was also dating her boss. Story 97. I dated a divorcee for around 11 months. During that time, she tried to kill me 4 times. The first should have been the sign to leave, but I loved her. I left her 3 years ago, and I'm still mentally recovering from the emotional abuse. Story 98. Complete inability to discipline his 2 children. When his teenage son was caught messaging girls for nudes, he lost it on the school for not punishing other kids that had nothing to do with it. Noped right the out. Story 99. Am dating a divorcee right now. She fought for the divorce for years, but he would never agree to it because he didn't want the divorce. Finally, she saved up enough money on her own to hire a lawyer and go through with the divorce without needing his permission. She's pretty great, and we don't talk much about her ex-husband. The only thing she's ever told me about him was not to raise my voice at her because he used to do it a lot and it scared her, and also that he controlled her with money. We've dated for a couple years now, and she's never given me a reason to speak bad about her, so I believe her. Story 100. I dated this girl about 13 years ago. She was from Alabama, pretty cute. We met at a convention in New Orleans, had a great time. Saw her about twice a year at these conventions, and we always had a blast. So I finally decided to go visit her, so I flew down to Alabama. She made me sleep in her guest room. Her whole house was like a museum. The guest room was full of Disney figurines. She was divorced, and I think the first time I started to realize maybe she had a part in it was when I got in her car. The interior door panel shook when I closed the door. She said she had been in a fender bender earlier and just got the car back. I put my fingers in the space between the panel and started to look into the window cavity to see why it was loose. She freaked out at me, like went ballistic, saying I had no right to touch her car. She didn't give me permission, and she would have the professionals fix it. I've replaced so many side windows in my life. I knew exactly what I was doing. Later that night, we were relaxing at a bar, and she started in on how much better she is that she's divorced. I did something stupid, but I asked her if there was anything she would have changed about herself that might have made the marriage better. She stopped, looked at me with eyes of Satan, and said, snarling, I was a perfect wife. Don't you ever suggest I had anything to do with that marriage failing. I left the next day. She cheated on him. Story 101. Not married, but I dated a divorced woman that was a few years older than me. She seemed nice, but was very frigid in the sack. At first I thought, all right, she's probably a bit scared or concerned after going through a messy divorce. I can dig it, let's give it some time. After a few months passed, I realized that it wasn't just that she was shy, concerned, or we needed to get to know each other better. She was just frigid. Period. While this may seem shallow, I dumped her pretty quick once I came to that realization. I cannot be with someone that does not find me attractive. To me that says, I'm just with you for convenience's sake. I am not really into you specifically, and that is unacceptable. I get the feeling most men would not want to have a frigid girlfriend either, and strongly suspect this was the reason she and her ex-husband divorced. It sounds like a really little thing, but it isn't. It constantly made me feel like I was doing something wrong. She didn't like to hug, caress, or kiss, except very lightly, and only in private. Was extremely boring and almost a chore. What I had initially attributed to, well, she's just shy because of her divorce, or because we've only just met recently, was completely wrong. She was just frigid, and I just can't be with someone that doesn't feel warmth and affection towards me as I towards them. Again, I am almost positive that her ex-husband felt like this too, leading to their divorce. Ha, I haven't yet. I love my husband, and I truly think that there can be good people who just aren't good together. I just think they weren't good together. My gain. Story 102. From my experiences in a few relationships, I've learned to always pay attention to that first date story when you ask the question, "So why did you and your ex break up?" My ex had this crazy story about her ex-husband and all the thing he did to make her leave. Fast forward 5 years, and if I wasn't constantly accused of doing the same things, realized this woman has a pattern and got out best move I've ever made. Story 103. I was divorced when my current husband married me. He realized why I divorced my ex when my ex came out a couple years ago. Current husband's response was to look at me and say, "You were right." Story 104. My ex would talk about his ex-wife when we first got together. She was this way and that way, etc., etc. After we got married and whenever we would get into a fight, usually him trying to start, he started saying that I was also this way and that way, exactly the same things as his ex, and that her and I were exactly the same. Finally, one day it clicked that he was the common denominator and that her and I were not the issue, it was him. Shortly after this realization, I found out he had been cheating on me with a bunch of different drag queens throughout our city, and I left him. I quite often wonder if he did the same to his other ex, and in fact, she left him, and he didn't leave her like he always said. Story 105. I am my husband's fourth wife. He told me all his exes cheated on him and made me promise I would never cheat. I felt sorry for him. When we tried to have a baby, he told me he couldn't perform on demand and don't like being pressured to have. We eventually had 2 babies through artificial insemination. He refused to have with me while I was pregnant and then refused afterwards too, with various excuses. We've always slept in separate rooms because of his snoring and sleep apnea. He refuses to go to the doctor because it doesn't bother me. After 20 years of hardly any 15 years of no, I found a boyfriend. Now he's old lazy and has been unemployed for 10 months. Yeah, I think I figured it out. Story 106. It's always a good idea when marrying a divorced person to be open to a chance to chat with the ex. My mother's best friend Kay was married to a psycho, M. He was emotionally and physically abusive, and it took her a couple of years to get rid of him. He finally almost choked her to death. That was the end. This was back in the 70s, when authorities were less than responsive to domestic violence cases, especially when the male was fairly wealthy and upstanding member of the community, etc. So no jail time for the psychopath. Eventually, M found another woman, C, and the announcement of his impending marriage made the rounds. After a great deal of discussion, Mom and Kay tried to contact C and warn her that M was an ultra-violent SOB. No go. M had convinced the fiancé that Kay was the one that was nuts. Fast forward 5 years and the police find M by the pool. Suicide by gun and C in the bedroom murdered by strangulation. Story 107. I was in a relation for 3 years with a divorcee. Anytime he brought up wanting to get engaged, I had nightmares about aliens abducting me on my wedding day. Needless to say, I knew deep down we weren't right together. He was controlling and unbending in his ways. He also got drunk and phoned my dad to complain about me working too hard and not being at home with him. He told my dad to go get me because I wouldn't listen to him. Story 108. When I was 21, I dated a 29-year-old who was twice divorced. That should have been my first giant red flag, but I was young and dumb and in love. Lucky we didn't get married. But that relationship broke me, and I'm so glad it did. It was my emotional rock bottom, and I finally understood what the quote, "damaged people are dangerous because they know they can survive" meant. He was extremely selfish, and frankly, am convinced he was either a sociopath or had narcissist personality disorder. Everything was him and no one else. It's as if he was the only person in the world with feelings, or the only person in the world who had feelings that mattered. He had a contentious relationship with his sister, and he got pissed at me when I sided with her because she was always in the right and he was always being Anne. His mom played favorites and coddled him, and his mom would take his side. His dad would take the sister's side, and while Id'd take the sister's side, I'd try broker peace between them by reasoning with him, but there was no reasoning with him. He could never see anything from anyone's perspective, ever. He was also jealous and suspicious and controlling. That was because he was a cheater, as I found out later, and projected onto others and thought they must be as well. I have way too many stories of him being a complete piece of and very impulsive and looking back at it all. I'm shocked that I ever put up with that. We broke up when he cheated on me on a business trip in NYC with a chick from Germany who he wound up in a long-distance relationship with. I heard they got married. She turned into wife 3. As far as I know, divorce 3 hasn't rolled around yet, but I'm sure it's only a matter of time. Story 109. I realized it pretty early on. It was obvious she was a really decent person that didn't put up with anyone's, and I found out her ex-husband had got into meth. I eventually married her. Story 110. I found out a girl I just gave my number to is a 2-time divorcee, and she's only 31. Not passing judgment, I mean. Happens. But her friend says it was her ex faults, not hers. To which, okay, sure, benefit of the doubt. But it takes 2 also. I've pretty much given up any interest in the whole thing, as I just don't have time for this kind of. Story 111. I mean, sometimes 2 people realize they aren't in the right relationship. Of course, there will be stories of folks realizing that their partner has huge issues or is a serial cheater, but having the attitude espoused by the op seems like a way to never be satisfied in a relationship, because you'll always be looking for flaws rather than appreciating the other person as a complex, dynamic person capable of learning and growing. Story 112. Dated a divorced guy for about 3 months. Start of the relationship, he was extremely honest about everything. He had cheated on his ex-wife for 2 years because they married extremely young due to religion and they felt stuck. Then he moved out and dated his mistress for about a year, but that didn't work out. Him and his ex-wife have 2 kids. I was 23 and he was 29. So yeah, I was young and naive, and it was my first relationship in 5 years. It ended up being crazy. I found out he wasn't actually divorced, and he lied about everything being finalized. He moved in with me for 2 weeks to get away from his drug addict friends, and then got up and moved 10 hours away while I was sleeping. Left all of his stuff at my place too. I lost my lease, my new lease, my job and friends, and of course had quite a broken heart. He always called his ex-wife a narcissist and abusive, but I realize now that he was just projecting because his ex is probably a wonderful, hardworking lady. Takes care of the kids and owns a cafe bookstore. He's a fake, deep, try-hard artist type that has barely any talent or emotions. Yuck. Story 113. Narcissism infects all behaviors. Their insincerity and appearance of desperation elicited my sympathy to relive her of her pointless stress. Desire to show her how wonderful life is. Well, yup. I was that stupid and paid for it more dearly than you can imagine. Story 114. I began dating someone who was legally separated for like a year, and they were waiting on a court date to finalize the divorce. I knew both of them from high school and disliked the girl always. She's just a. The guy, he was always kind of a nerd. He went into the army. For reasons unknown to me, he managed to get her to go along for the ride. We reconnected when he discharged from the army. He told me their marriage fell apart while he was deployed. She cheated on him and was now a drug addict. He had custody of their kid. I believed this because she was in high school, and I had already heard rumors of her drug use. In the beginning stages of our dating, she was openly hostile to me, probably from our issues stemming from high school, but in any case, she would email my ex regarding visitation of their child and to harass us. In one of those emails, she said, "Does she know how you are yet?" We both brushed it off at the time, words of a drug addict and all. However, 3 years later, and yeah, I know how he is. Ruined my life, left me and my son homeless, penniless, and traumatized from his drinking and PTSD outbursts. From his insane fights with his ex to losing jobs to driving drunk. Not a good person after all, and to top it all off, caught him engaged in trying to cheat on me. He was turned down, and at least I had that satisfaction. Never trust a drug addict, but never trust a spouse of a drug addict either. Story 115. Can't help but notice a lot more of these comments than I originally thought possible were from people who dated, married a cheater, and expected it not to happen to them. Even if their marriage relationship is on the rocks or ending, if they find someone else instead of leaving, they'll probably do it again. Obvious, I guess not. Apparently PSA cheaters cheat. Story 116. My wife got married too young at 19, raised in a very religious home, to an abusive D-bag, and is the best person ever, and we just had our first child Monday. Sorry to not answer this appropriately. Story 117. Okay, my time to shine here, although I'm probably way too late on this one. Here goes nothing. I am recently divorced 3 months. I met the guy some 20 years ago when we were in our late 20s, dated him for a while, but eventually it didn't work out, and we just became friends. A year later, he is engaged to this girl, but they broke it off because he was still in love with me. Then he got engaged to yet another girl but got left at the altar. Then a few years later, when the girl he first got engaged to was getting married, she left her husband at the altar for him. The fact that he would even consider doing that after being left at the altar himself was a huge red flag that I didn't spot somehow. That stupid. Anyway, that didn't work out either. So he married another girl, got 2 kids, but she died of cancer. 6 years later, his kids almost forced him to give me a chance again, and we dated and got married. That was 3 years ago. As I said, we got a divorce 3 months ago. Edit, I forgot to mention the biggest red flag. On the day I met him, he told me he loved me. Who that does something like that? Classic schmosby. Story 118. My friend married a divorcee. He wouldn't do anything around the house, complained about her cooking. When they had a kid, he'd play video games ones he could pause but was too busy to get the kid if they were crying. He was 10 years older than her. Ran up credit cards, invested in stupid schemes. She secretly saved up money and just up and left him. Story 119. Forget the person you're dating. Feel the chemistry between you and their kids. If they like you, your relationship will be a good one. If they don't, it's best you don't drag it out. Story 120. Just so all you youngings know, it ain't all as it seems on the surface. I was with my former wife for 17 years, married for 7. We met in the city and lived that lifestyle happily. I had a farming background, tried to bring her into it for years, but to no avail. She left several times before we had an amicable divorce, no kids. I was devastated and felt lost for almost a year. Then met a gal at the farmer's market who had the same ideas about life as I did, and we got married a year after our first date. She's also divorced, and we're happier than anyone we know. Life is how you live it. Story 121. I didn't marry him, but found out after 2 years of dating him, and during which we lived together for a bit, that it turns out I was the other woman. He'd come live with me when he was in couples therapy with her, and would tell her he was with family. She didn't get along with his family. He even somehow got his kids to never mention me. So knowing how manipulative he was, I wrote her a 5-page letter complete with pictures of our travels and holidays together for her to understand that this wasn't a joke. I didn't want him to be able to lie his way out of this. I also found out I wasn't the only other woman. So anyway, he and his wife are still together, and even though he kept texting me for a year after I broke it off, told they're still posting lovely pictures about their happy family life. Story 122. My wife had a previous marriage. I see some of the things that got her in trouble, but from the stories, I can tell she had never been in a relationship where the guy made it known he was never going to leave. Once I made it known and actually stick through the bad, she quit the bad stuff pretty quick, and we couldn't be happier. I married my best friend, and I hope I find her in every life after this one. Story 123. This won't get any attention because it's not juicy enough. My wife and I are divorcees. We both got married too young to the wrong people. She's strong-willed and decided to stop taking from her ex. We've been together 8 years. Married 6. Life with her has been amazing. Story 124. I have met his ex-wife, and all I can do is wonder how they got together in the first place. Their personalities are so different and incompatible, it boggles my mind that they had a kid together. Apparently they ended up getting together because she got pregnant after their first date. It all makes sense now. Story 125. Both my husband and I were divorced before marrying each other, and I've never once had that thought. His ex was a real piece of work and was just a terrible person. I had my flaws in my marriage to my ex, but a lot of our issues were brought on by him and his actions. I learned a lot from my first marriage, and it helped me grow to be the wife and mother I am now. My husband and I are perfect for each other and just both married the wrong person the first time, which led us to each other. Story 126. When she forgot to take her pill, then found out she'd never been taking them at all. Wouldn't swap my son for the world, but wish he had a different mother, 4 children now, all with different fathers. Story 127. My ex always told me that she and her first wife divorced because her first wife began to party and drink a lot. 10 years later, I divorced her for similar reasons. I realized that she was describing herself and the reasons that her first wife had divorced her. Spending all your money on a secret cocaine and ketamine addiction is not great for a marriage, kids. Story 128. Bit late to this, but my parents were each married fairly young to other people. No kids from those marriages, and they each got divorced when it wasn't working. I don't know the details why, sorry. Some mutual friends introduced them to each other, and they hit it off immediately. Got married within 6 months, I believe? Back then, there were tax benefits, because even if you got married in December, you could claim the whole year together on income taxes in Canada. They've been happily married 34 years now. Story 129. I am divorced and married to a divorcee. My ex-wife was just an awful human, so that kinda helped with the dissolution of our marriage. I married my divorce lawyer. She initially would tell me horror stories about her ex-husband, but then it eventually came out that she had cheated on him, both emotionally and physically, and not with the same guy. Both times she cheated were during law school and when her kids were really young. Luckily, she and her ex-husband have resolved their issues and he's an awesome guy. We hang out all the time, and he has an open invitation to our home. My ex-wife, on the other hand, is very spiteful and bitter. Despite her telling everyone that I was abusive, I had never laid a hand on her, nor raised my voice. Our marriage was so passionless, we almost never even fought, and addicted to drugs. I didn't even smoke weed at the time. The first long-term guy of hers figured it out really quick when I pointed out that she had cheated on me with him. He decided not long after that he wanted to be a woman. So now he's a she. The new one left my mother's neighbor. She's absolutely gorgeous for my ex-wife because he wanted an older woman. She says he could get it up but couldn't finish. She's pretty sure he's into guys too. Story 130. Did not marry either of them but realized why the divorces happened in both cases. First one was just so afraid of commitment, restless and unhappy in his life. Very unfocused and constantly looking for the next best thing. He viewed stability as stagnation. There was constant upheaval and chaos. Not exactly an ideal father either. Married once, engaged twice before I met him. Second one was so jaded by his divorce, claimed he wanted a fresh start and a relationship that developed from a place of honesty. He claimed he was so young when he got married, he didn't know who he was then, blah blah blah. Ended up just being afraid of commitment but was too afraid to tell me, basically had to move forward with the breakup for him, because he couldn't just be honest with me. Story 131. A bit of context. He was married for a short time, not quite 3 years. When I met him, he told me about how his ex-wife was such a horrible person, never on his side, always in her family's side, and how her family was horrible to him. Also said she was very controlling about him, his money, and his friends. When we went to meet my family, I thought everything went well. He talked with everyone and nothing was wrong to me, but the minute we stepped out of my mom's house, he started to complain about how my cousins weren't paying enough attention to him or that my mom didn't like him, which was nowhere near what I saw. There I took pity on his ex-wife and could totally see her just stating the facts of how what he thought was just not true. Also, most of the time, he is very sweet, but when he's in a frisky mood, he complains about everything. I mean every single thing. Around him bothers him, the way people walk near him or in front of him too slow even when we are not in a hurry, or the way people stand on the sidewalk. Yes, just stand, kids playing, the noise, you name it. He hates it, so that's very tiresome. I really love him, but he tries my patience far too many times. I now try not to listen when he's in a mood. Edit misspelled. Story 132. At this point, most people are statistically likely to marry a divorced person sometime in their life. I think you'll need to forgive and forget. Move on. Most people keep learning. Story 133. He's really bad at communication. He will say things like, "I love you too" if I say it first, but that's about it. He's a kind, caring person, and he shows it through actions, waking up with me every morning before work to have coffee with me when he doesn't have to get up until later, making us food, starting my car in the morning, doing a lot of the more difficult work around the house. He just doesn't vocalize it directly. It can make solving conflict very frustrating, and also, you need to have a bit of confidence to be with someone who isn't going to reassure you that they love you. He also doesn't give flowers or gifts, which I appreciate because I'd rather spend money on an experience, but I know that would get to some people as well. Story 134. Didn't quite marry the gal, but the avoidance of simple questions. refusing to let me meet her parents, friends, kids, despite telling me all about their complete lives over several years. The rows finally broke when she got a text from her ex-husband, whom she no longer spoke with, was the most casual "hey, what's the plan for the kids" information request I'd ever seen, as if no conflict ever existed. Little snooping, and I found out every minute I spent with her was an elaborate lie to her friends, co-workers, or family. Said goodbye on her last deployment and left her car at the airport much to her dismay. Story 135. I dated a divorced guy, but then it turns out he wasn't divorced yet, but he was getting a divorce. No, wait. It's not that the paperwork hasn't gone through yet. It's that he hasn't filed it. At all. Ooh, and she's pregnant, but it's not his. It was his. Story 136. I haven't seen this posted, but I figure it should be said. Before social media and the like made it easy to keep track of your exes, you could sleep easy thinking they got what they deserved. Karma is A and all that, but sometimes you get cheated on and that person goes on to have a terrific life. That can be the hardest thing to get over, in my opinion. Story 137. As soon as she found out I was being medically discharged from the army, no more guaranteed paycheck, healthcare, etc. It's like a switch was flipped. Glad I have pretty much zero interaction with her now. Story 138. That divorcee. I was told by my last partner that my previous abusive relationships and abusive upbringing make me completely unsuitable for anyone to date. She broke up with me on our anniversary. That was cool. Story 139. Didn't actually do the wedding, so maybe this doesn't fully count, but I was ready to marry her. That is, until I decided enough was enough with me spending money on her. I was young and naive at the time, and she claimed to have cancer while we were together, so she used excuses like being late on her medical bills to convince me to give her cash. About 2 years into the relationship, she started a different tactic of asking me to buy her something in a store we were in and to put it on her tab, as she called it. Of course, she never paid me back. But the tab kept increasing until eventually I had enough and refused to buy her more until she paid me back. Conveniently, she soon claimed to have a brain tumor to plant the seed of why she suddenly started drifting away emotionally, because she didn't want me to watch her die. But then I caught her cheating on me. The pieces fell into place. Her last long-term relationship ended with her meeting me when she claimed to be recently single, but still had to go to her ex's place to collect her things. But then I realized she did the same thing to me. Whether she has cancer or not, I'll never know. But she uses it as a manipulator to squeeze money out of men and swiftly move on to the next one whenever a guy stops paying up. Unfortunate, I had to go through that. But glad I got it out of the way early in life, so that I can detect red flags much more easily. Story 140. Didn't marry the guy, but dated him for a while. He grew up in Soviet Bulgaria, so I chalked some of it up to cultural and generational differences. He first said that he had a thing for dating crazy women before turning to me. No offense. He'd demand that I come over certain days, which bothered me. He'd harp on my clothing choices pretty often. He'd harp on my lipstick. Apparently he hated red lipstick and took me makeup shopping so he wouldn't have to see it again. He didn't like my hair being so long because it attracted too much attention. The breaking point was when we went to Hawaii. He had gained a little weight and was insecure about it, so decided to take it out on me. He made a few animal sounds at me when I was eating. Like, dude, seriously? I've got visible abs. You don't right now. He had a huge fit at a restaurant about a dish that didn't conform to his current diet. He stormed away from the table to confront the waitress who'd thrown the check into the table, leaving me without a word. I got to the front and hung back, and the manager apologized whilst the server yelled at him. In the car, he criticized me for cowering in the corner and said I should have gone outside. Then he asked, "What's wrong with you? Did your parents abuse you or something?" When I replied yes, he said something snarky I can't quite recall. I got sent home early from that vacation. Story 141. LPT people. If someone says their ex is crazy or a psycho, then either that person is lying or they have bad judgment. Either is a terrible trait in someone. Story 142. I never imagined I would be a divorcee. Then after 7 months of marriage, my first husband had a brain surgery that left him essentially a child. I struggled with the decision before ultimately realizing I couldn't have children or a family with someone who couldn't take care of himself and threatened to kill himself if I left. I met someone a few months later and struggled with how to tell him I was separated after our first date. He was amazing and told me it didn't matter to him as long as I was sure I wanted to be in a new relationship. The actual divorce was long and painful, but my new partner was amazing and patient and understanding. He is in all ways the most amazing person I've met and the love of my life. We have an incredible toddler whom we adore. I never know how long my luck will last, but I thank the universe for giving me someone who could recognize divorced is not necessarily a bad word. Story 143. I know why my husband's ex divorced him. She was so codependent on her family, she was never really his wife. I literally found all the stuff from their divorce proceedings, and even his family backs up the fact that she was and is very codependent on her family. I personally won't have anything to do with her even though I'm the monkey in the middle between him and his ex's family to arrange summer visits with his son. Not that she does anything with their son anyway. It's a show. Jokes on her because had she not been so blinded by her family, she could have had a wonderful man once the adjustment period of him coming back from war was over. Now he's mine, and we have our rough moments, especially after his PTSD finally caught up with him. We have two wonderful kiddos together. Story 144. Oh God. I married a man who was twice divorced and then had just come out of a long-term de facto relationship. He was 38 at the time. Why wasn't that enough of a red flag for me? He told me often how he had learned and grown from these failed relationships. Well, we lasted a decade. Then I saw him for the manipulative, sponging, deceptive user he is. He just failed to give, to contribute, to pull his weight, to adult. So damn disappointed in myself that it took me so long to see. Story 145. My husband and I have both been previously divorced. Our exes are both bad people. I have no contact with mine and I like it that way. He has a daughter with his, so he still has to deal with her. My husband and I have had our troubles mostly due to my issues, but we just work together and always have. We have a great relationship. Edit to add that we both got married for the first time when we were 20. We both thought we knew what we were doing, but obviously didn't. Story 146. Never because they divorced the other person, not the other way around. Their ex-wife is assuming he's alive, an abusive shitbag who took advantage of somebody who'd moved here from another country and then bailed on them as soon as they could. Divorcees aren't damaged goods, but it's clear a lot of abusers get through to another relationship because they are master manipulators. Story 147. Am married to a divorcee. They didn't date long before they got married, and she walked out on him before they had even been married a year. Just got in her car and drove off across the country back to her family. A few years before I had met her, she's a pretty amazing person, and from what I've heard from her family, he was a pretty terrible person, and she is very clear that she made mistakes. We have been together 6 years now, just had a second kid 2 weeks ago, and our 3-year anniversary is next month. My narcissist dad basically abandoned my family after a 32-year marriage for a more obedient wife, who basically is scared to not be compliant. Buyer's remorse. My mom is a pretty awesome person too. I honestly think my mom should have left him years before, but she put up with it. Him leaving was likely a blessing for everyone. Sometimes it really is only one person. Story 148. About a month after wedding. There had been some minor arguments before, but civility was kept. This time I saw full-on rage and combativeness. She went from 0 to 90 in one sentence. Then she said the nastiest things. About an hour later, she says, "What is said in anger isn't real. No one means those things. That. I sure have control over what I say. I'm a divorcee." My boyfriend was concerned at first, but I think after several run-ins with my ex, he realizes that he's nuts. I think it's fair to be wary of people who have a failed marriage behind them. If they're still in love with their ex or very bitter, it's probably best to leave. Story 149. Not married yet, but engaged to a divorcee. She wanted to leave him because he's a piece of, and he wanted to leave her because he's a moron and doesn't realize how great she is. Basically, a mutual split. His loss. She's perfect for me in every way. And also, she plays a mean frontline in Heroes of the Storm, so when I play squishy assassins, I'm 95 less likely to get dived on when she's doing Diablo things. These are important things when you commit to a long-term relationship with a MOBA player, which I have been playing the genre off and on since Dota All-Stars. Story 150. I find the notion that one person is at fault for a failed marriage to be amusing. More often than not, both sides are reasonable people who are just with the wrong match. My ex-wife was a truly horrible partner for me, but I could see her being great for someone else. I assume the inverse is likely true as well. Story 151, late to the party on this one, but going to share anyways. I dated a twice-divorced man who seemed to be really nice, and we had been acquaintances for about a year. Although each wife was different, I really saw that the root of the problem came down to a utter refusal to communicate needs, wants, etc. My ex literally said he would prefer to bury his head in the sand and wait for the storm to pass than do anything constructive to help resolve any tiff or grievance. It was like pulling teeth just to even get him to say whether or not he was upset or even mildly annoyed by anything I was doing. Sometimes he would get so discontented with everything that he would go out and get drunk on a weeknight and get himself stranded up in a bar where he couldn't drive home. I'm never the type to yell, scream, or get angry in a violent way. Most of the time, I ended up just pleading with him to let me know what I could do. Although he never cheated on me, apparently that's what he and his ex-wives did when they got sick of each other but didn't want to say anything about it. Looking back a couple years later, I'm happily out of that relationship, but I still feel kind of sorry for him.